Have you ever wondered if the stories your grandparents told you held a deeper, hidden truth? For centuries, myths and legends have woven their way through the tapestry of human culture, passed down from one generation to the next. But what if these tales were more than just entertainment? What if they were ancient codes, carefully preserved secrets meant to survive the rise and fall of civilizations? From whispered folklore in remote villages to grand epics recited by firelight, these narratives have endured wars, migrations, and the relentless march of modernization defying time itself. They carry within them the echoes of forgotten worlds, unbroken chains of wisdom that connect us to our deepest roots. Today, we're setting out on a journey to uncover 30 of these incredible mythical traditions, each one a testament to human resilience and imagination. These aren't just stories, they're living heirlooms, shaped and refined over thousands of years, yet still pulsing with relevance today. We'll travel across continents and through time, exploring how oral histories, ritual practices, and symbolic art forms have kept ancient truths alive in ways that written records alone never could. You'll discover how certain myths functioned as maps, moral guides, or even warnings embedded so deeply in culture that they outlived empires and adapted to new eras without losing their core meaning. This exploration is about more than curiosity. It's about reclaiming a part of ourselves that modern life often overlooks. By understanding how these traditions were safeguarded, we touch something universal, the human urge to preserve what matters most. So settle in and open your mind to the possibility that myth is not merely fantasy, it's a language of memory, a bridge to our collective past, and perhaps a guide to our future. What you're about to witness will forever change how you see the stories we tell and why they continue to resonate generation after generation. Our journey begins not in a dusty library or a grand temple, but on the cold, windswept shores of ancient Scandinavia. Here, amidst the fjords and forests, the Norse people developed a mystical tradition that was both an alphabet and a form of magic. They saw the world as a place filled with invisible forces, and they believed they could interact with those forces through two powerful practices, the carving of runes and the art of Seder magic. This wasn't mere superstition, it was a sophisticated spiritual technology, a way of shaping fate itself. The runes were far more than simple letters for writing messages. Each character, known as a stave, was a vessel of immense power. The word rune itself comes from an old Germanic term meaning secret or whisper, hinting at their hidden nature. A rune wasn't just drawn, it was ceremonially carved into wood, bone, or stone, a process that activated its potential. A warrior might carve the tiu as rune, shaped like an arrow, into his spear to ensure victory in battle. A farmer could inscribe the fehu symbol, representing cattle and wealth, on a boundary stone to protect his livestock and bring prosperity. These inscriptions were acts of creation, a way of pulling abstract desires into tangible reality. They served as protective talismans, as memorials for the dead that guided their spirits, and as a means of direct communication with the gods like Odin, who famously sacrificed himself on the world tree to gain knowledge of the runes. Alongside the runes existed Seder, a form of prophecy and magic often associated with the goddess Freyja. This practice was primarily, though not exclusively, the domain of women known as vulvas. These were highly respected seeresses who would travel between communities. A vulva would enter a trance-like state, sometimes aided by rhythmic chanting or rituals, to journey beyond the physical world. In this state, she could foretell the future, find lost objects, or discern the will of the gods. Her prophecies could determine when a village should plant crops, whether a trading voyage would succeed, or how to appease a displeased spirit. It was a vital service for survival in an unpredictable world. The knowledge of both runes and Seder wasn't written in books for anyone to find. It was an oral tradition, a sacred trust passed down through generations of skilled practitioners. Skalds, the poet-historians, memorized complex verses that encoded magical knowledge within their stories. A Volva would take on an apprentice, teaching her the intricate songs, gestures, and states of consciousness required for Seda. This ensured the survival of these practices through the Viking Age and beyond, their secrets whispered from teacher to student long after the great halls had fallen silent. They understood that true power isn't just in knowing the symbol, but in understanding the intention and tradition behind it, a legacy crafted to withstand the test of time. While the Norse sought to shape fate with runes and trance, a different kind of magic was being woven to the west, across the sea in the misty hills of ancient Ireland and Britain. Here, the Celts perfected an art form so powerful it could preserve a culture's entire identity without a single written word, the sacred tradition of the bard. In a society that deeply distrusted the permanence of writing, believing it could freeze and kill a living idea, they placed their entire historical, legal, and spiritual heritage in the hands of these master poets and storytellers. A bard was far more than an entertainer. They were a walking library, a living historian, and the most vital thread in the social fabric. This immense responsibility was safeguarded through an incredibly rigorous system of training. A young apprentice bard would undergo up to 20 years of intense mental conditioning under a master. Their curriculum was monumental. They were required to memorize hundreds of traditional stories, poems, and genealogies, mastering a complex set of poetic meters and intricate rhyming schemes. This wasn't just for artistic flair. The specific rhythms and sounds acted as a mnemonic device, a built-in error-checking system. If a bard stumbled on a rhyme or broke the meter, both they and the audience would know instantly that a mistake had been made, ensuring the version told today was identical to the one told centuries prior. They often accompanied their recitations with a small harp, the music providing another layer of rhythmic structure to lock the words in place. Through this method, vast epic cycles that would fill thousands of printed pages were committed to memory and passed down with astonishing accuracy. Tales like the Ulster Cycle, detailing the heroic deeds of Cu Chulainn, and the Welsh Mabinogion, filled with ancient gods and magical encounters, were not written down until centuries after they were first composed. Their survival is a testament to the power of this oral tradition. These stories served as a moral compass, a record of customary laws, and a map of the kingdom's spiritual landscape. To hear a bard recite the story of a great battle was to understand the codes of honor that bound their society. To learn a genealogy was to know one's place in the world. Perhaps the most stunning example of this tradition's longevity and adaptability is the Arthurian legend. While we often think of it as a medieval written romance, its roots are deeply Celtic, emerging from oral tales of a warrior king who fought against invading forces. These early stories of Arthur, his knights, and the mystical quest for the Holy Grail were kept alive for hundreds of years by Welsh and Breton bards, evolving with each telling. They were the raw material that French poets like Chrétien de Troyes would later discover and adapt into the chivalric romances we know today. The bards ensured the core of the myth, its themes of sacrifice, destiny, and the search for enlightenment survived its journey from ancient oral tale to global phenomenon, proving that a story, when cared for properly, is truly immortal. Now, imagine a place where the boundary between the mortal world and the divine was believed to be whisper-thin, a sacred site where the very god of light was thought to speak directly to humanity. This was the oracle at Delphi, the most influential and revered prophetic institution in the ancient Greek world. For over 1,000 years, kings and commoners, philosophers and generals all made the arduous pilgrimage up the slopes of Mount Parnassus. They came with desperate questions about war, famine, colonization, and personal destiny, seeking guidance from a single, enigmatic source, the Pythia, the priestess of Apollo. What they encountered was not a simple fortune teller, but the apex of a meticulously preserved tradition, a system of divine communication so complex and stable that it functioned as the central nervous system of the classical world for centuries. The role of the Pythia was never a matter of random chance or personal ambition. She was chosen from the women of Delphi, often from a respected local family, and her life was consecrated entirely to the god Apollo. She was required to lead a life of strict purity and celibacy, residing in the temple's sacred precinct. This was not a solitary role, however. She operated within a powerful and structured religious organization, supported by a guild of priests who served as interpreters and caretakers of the elaborate ritual procedures. This entire system, the selection of the priestess, the specific rituals, and the methods of interpretation, was an oral tradition passed down through generations of these priestly lineages. The secrets of the sanctuary were not written in manuals. They were lived experiences taught from one priest to the next, from one Pythia to her eventual successor, ensuring an unbroken chain of practice that spanned millennia. The famed prophetic ritual itself was a masterpiece of controlled, traditional theater, designed to facilitate a connection to the divine. On specific days each month deemed auspicious by the priests, the Pythia would undergo a series of elaborate preparations. She would first bathe in the sacred Castalian spring, a ritual act of purification. She would then descend into the innermost chamber of the temple, the Aditon, and seat herself on a tall, three-legged tripod cauldron positioned over a deep fissure in the rock. Ancient sources describe how intoxicating vapors would rise from this chasm. For centuries, this was dismissed as myth, but modern geological investigations have confirmed that the site lies on two intersecting fault lines, which likely released small concentrations of ethylene gas, a sweet-smelling hydrocarbon known to induce a trance-like euphoric and mildly delirious state. The inhalation of these gases was not a random event. It was a calculated part of the ritual, a traditional method for altering consciousness that was carefully managed by the attending priests. In this altered state, the Pythia would deliver the god's responses. Her utterances were often frenzied, garbled, and incomprehensible, the raw, unfiltered voice of the divine. This is where the second crucial layer of the tradition came into play, the priests of Apollo. These highly educated men were the guardians of the interpretive keys. They would translate the Pythia's chaotic cries and fragmented phrases into the elegant, often ambiguously worded hexameter verses that were delivered to the supplicant. Their interpretations were not made on a whim. They were guided by a deep understanding of political realities, historical precedent, and a vast repository of oracles from the past. A question about starting a war might yield a response like, "If you cross the river, a great empire will fall," a statement that could be claimed as true regardless of the outcome. This layered process, the induced trance, and the skilled interpretation created a perfect feedback loop. The mysterious source of the prophecy granted it divine authority, while the polished, ambiguous delivery ensured its practical longevity and relevance, allowing the oracle to maintain its prestige through countless political upheavals. It was this powerful combination of mystical experience and shrewd human curation, passed down through an unbroken priestly lineage, that made Delphi the enduring and trusted spiritual compass of the ancient world. From the mystical vapors of Delphi, we journey now to the sun-baked banks of the Nile, where an entire civilization dedicated itself to perhaps the most profound human mystery, what lies beyond death. The ancient Egyptians did not see death as an end, but as a critical transition, a perilous journey to an eternal afterlife that required meticulous preparation. This belief gave rise to one of history's most elaborate and enduring spiritual systems, a complex tapestry of mortuary practices and magical texts designed to guide and protect the soul. At the heart of this system was the Book of the Dead, a collection of spells and incantations, but this was far more than a book. It was a divine roadmap, and its preservation was a sacred duty entrusted to a highly specialized class of scribes and priests. The term Book of the Dead is actually a modern misnomer. The Egyptians themselves called it the Book of Coming Forth by Day, a name that beautifully captures its purpose: to empower the deceased to overcome the dangers of the underworld and emerge victorious, reborn into a radiant new existence. These were not passive prayers but active declarations of power. A spell might provide the words to convince a demonic guardian to stand aside. Another might ensure the heart would not bear false witness during the final judgment. And yet another could transform the soul into a heron, a snake, or even a god to escape various perils. This knowledge was considered so essential that individuals of means would commission their own personalized copies to be buried with them, often beautifully illustrated on papyrus scrolls and placed within their coffin. The creation and accurate transmission of these sacred texts was not a task for amateurs. It was the life's work of priestly scribes trained in the houses of life, scriptoriums attached to major temples. These institutions functioned as the world's first universities and publishing houses combined. Here, a young scribe would undergo decades of rigorous training, learning the complex hieroglyphic and hieratic scripts and memorizing the vast corpus of funerary literature. The process was one of reverent copying and recitation. A master scribe would dictate a spell from memory, and the student would carefully transcribe it onto a papyrus sheet or a piece of pottery used for practice. Any mistake was not merely a grammatical error, it was a potential cosmic flaw that could render a spell useless and jeopardize a soul's eternity. This oral method of dictation and repetition, generation after generation, ensured the spells were preserved with astonishing fidelity for over 2,000 years. Crucially, this sacred knowledge often remained within specific, powerful families who served the temple for centuries. A father would teach his son not just the correct hieroglyphs, but the precise intonation, the accompanying hand gestures, and the proper rituals for activating a spell's power. This created powerful dynasties of priest scribes, like those at Thebes or Memphis, who became the living repositories of tradition. They were the only ones qualified to perform the intricate opening of the mouth ceremony, which ritually reanimated the mummy's senses for the afterlife, or to recite the spells that would protect the tomb from desecration. Their expertise ensured that the precise words that guided a pharaoh of the New Kingdom were the same ones available to a noblewoman centuries later. This unbroken chain of oral and scribbled tradition allowed Egyptian funerary practices to evolve while maintaining their core integrity. New spells were added and local variations emerged, but the fundamental purpose remained unchanged because the institution protecting it was so robust. The ultimate testament to its success is physical. We have copies of the Book of the Dead spanning more than a millennium that show only minor variations. The entire Egyptian conception of the afterlife, from the weighing of the heart against the feather of truth to the eternal fields of peace, was safeguarded not in stone, but in the carefully trained memories and practiced hands of devoted priests, a tradition so powerful it continues to speak to us from across the ages. Far from the structured temples of Egypt, a different kind of spiritual journey was unfolding across the vast landscapes of North America. For countless generations, many Native American tribes have held a profound belief that an individual's purpose and strength are not given, but discovered through direct communion with the spirit world. This discovery was facilitated through one of the most enduring and personal rites of passage, the vision quest. Unlike the communal rituals of Delphi or the scribbled traditions of Egypt, this was a solitary ordeal, a deeply individual pilgrimage into both the wilderness and the self, a tradition so resilient it has survived centuries of immense cultural pressure. The vision quest, known by names like Hanbal Sire to the Lakota or simply Crying for a Dream, was typically undertaken by young people on the cusp of adulthood. But its purpose went far beyond marking a birthday. It was a spiritual necessity. The quest was a means to discover one's unique place within the intricate web of life, to receive a vision that would reveal a personal song, a protective spirit, or a life path. This wasn't a choice made lightly. An elder or medicine person would first determine if the seeker was prepared and then guide them through the complex preparations. These involved purification rites in a sweat lodge, a ceremony designed to cleanse the body and mind of impurities, and prayers offered with tobacco, a sacred plant that carries intentions to the spirit world. Only then would the seeker be led to a remote, powerful place, a mountaintop, a deep forest, or a high plateau to be left alone for 4 days and nights. The core of the quest was the embrace of vulnerability and openness. Stripped of worldly comforts, the seeker would fast from food and water, sitting within a small, sacred circle marked by stones. This physical deprivation, combined with prolonged isolation and exposure to the elements, served to break down the ego and the distractions of everyday life. In this heightened state of physical and mental acuity, every sound carried meaning: the cry of an eagle, the direction of the wind, the patterns of the stars. The goal was to receive a vision, a vivid and often symbolic dream or waking revelation. This vision might present a spirit animal guide, an ancestor, or a cryptic message that required later interpretation with the help of the elder. This received wisdom became the individual's spiritual property, a source of guidance, protection, and power for the rest of their life. It was a direct, unmediated line to the sacred, a conversation between a person and the universe. The true miracle of this tradition is not its ancient practice, but its incredible survival. The arrival of European colonists and the subsequent policies of the United States government launched a sustained assault on Native American cultures. Children were forcibly removed from their families and sent to boarding schools designed to kill the Indian, save the man, where they were punished for speaking their languages or practicing their ceremonies. Religious practices, including the sun dance and vision quests, were officially banned for decades. The very land that was essential for these rituals was systematically taken away, severed from the people who held it sacred. In the face of this, the knowledge of how to conduct a true vision quest could have been lost forever. Yet it endured. This survival is a testament to the fierceness of oral tradition and the courage of countless elders who became living libraries. When written records were forbidden, they memorized. When ceremonies were driven underground, they practiced in secret. Knowledge was not stored in books, but in the songs they sang, the stories they told, and the rituals they performed in hidden places. A medicine man would whisper the ancient prayers to his grandchildren under the cover of night. A community would gather in a remote canyon to conduct a ceremony away from the eyes of government agents. This clandestine, oral passage of knowledge from one generation to the next ensured the flame was never extinguished, preserving the intricate details of preparation, interpretation, and respect that make the quest authentic. Today, the Vision Quest is experiencing a powerful resurgence, a reclamation of identity and spiritual sovereignty. Modern seekers, both native and non-native, are drawn to its transformative potential. However, this has also led to complex questions about cultural appropriation versus appreciation. Responsible practitioners emphasize that this is not a self-help retreat but a sacred ceremony steeped in a specific cultural context. They stress the irreplaceable role of genuine elders who hold the lineage, who can properly prepare a seeker, interpret a vision, and integrate the experience back into community life. The tradition's modern practice is a powerful blend of ancient wisdom and contemporary relevance, proving that some of the deepest truths are not found in grand monuments, but in the quiet, persistent courage of individuals seeking connection, a practice kept alive by the unwavering determination of those who refuse to let their world be silenced. While the Vision Quest represents a deeply personal spiritual journey, other cultures developed equally intricate traditions to explain the unseen forces in the world around them, creating entire pantheons of supernatural beings. In Japan, the ancient and enduring belief in yokai represents one of the world's most vibrant and complex supernatural mythologies. These are not mere monsters or simple ghosts. yokai are a vast and bewildering array of supernatural entities, spirits, and phenomena that inhabit the natural world, ranging from mischievous tricksters to benevolent guardians and utterly terrifying omens. For centuries, Japanese families, artists, and storytellers have collaboratively preserved this knowledge, ensuring that the world of yokai remains a living, breathing part of the culture, seamlessly woven into the fabric of daily life and the changing seasons. The methods of preservation are as diverse as the yokai themselves. One of the most beautiful and effective was the creation of illustrated narrative scrolls known as emaki. As far back as the medieval period, artists would paint long, horizontal scrolls depicting hundreds of different yokai in a single, continuous parade. The most famous of these is the 16th century Hyaki Yajiro, or Night Parade of 100 Demons, which vividly illustrates a chaotic procession of supernatural beings. These scrolls were not hidden away in museums. They were shared and discussed within communities, often during specific times of the year. They served as a visual encyclopedia, a way to catalog and recognize these elusive creatures. A farmer might see a strange mist over his field and later consult a scroll to identify it as a hitsuki kozo, a yokai that licks the soot off kitchen grates. This visual tradition was a crucial educational tool, transforming abstract fears into identifiable, almost tangible forms, and it was passed down through generations of artisan families who specialized in this unique art form. This knowledge was further cemented through its integration into the annual cycle of seasonal festivals, or matsuri. Communities didn't just tell stories about yokai. They performed rituals to appease, ward off, or welcome them, aligning these practices with the natural and agricultural calendar. The Summer Aben Festival, for instance, is a time when the spirits of ancestors are believed to return to the world of the living. While these are typically welcomed spirits, the thin boundary between worlds also allows for more mischievous yokai to cross over, leading to traditions like hanging sharp-edged shimanoa ropes and holly branches at entrances to deter them. The Setsuban festival in early spring involves the ritual throwing of roasted soybeans to drive away malevolent spirits and invite good fortune into the home, with someone in the family often wearing an oni ogre mask to represent the evil being cast out. These annual participatory rituals ensured that each new generation learned about the yokai not as dusty folklore, but as active forces that required understanding and respect, tying their existence directly to the community's well-being and the rhythms of nature. Perhaps the most intimate and powerful vehicle for preserving this tradition has been the simple bedtime story. For centuries, Japanese parents and grandparents have used tales of yokai as both entertainment and moral instruction, a practice known as hanashi. A story about the kappa, a water imp with a bowl-shaped head that loves cucumbers but also drowns careless children, served as a serious warning about the dangers of playing near rivers unsupervised. The tale of the Zashiki Warashi, a protective spirit that appears as a child and brings fortune to a household but flees if treated poorly, taught lessons about hospitality and kindness. These stories were told and retold, their details refined with each telling, creating a powerful oral tradition that was personalized within each family. The knowledge of which yokai inhabited the local river, which tree in the forest was sacred, or which strange sound in the night signaled a particular spirit was practical, localized information passed from elder to child, ensuring the landscape remained alive with meaning and mystery. This oral transmission guaranteed the tradition's flexibility and resilience, allowing it to adapt and survive even into the modern era, demonstrating that the most powerful magic is often found not in grand temples, but in the whispered stories that connect one generation to the next. This deep connection to the natural and spiritual world finds a fascinating parallel in the heart of the Eastern European home, where Slavic families cultivated a unique relationship with an invisible member of their household. For countless generations across the vast expanse from Russia to the Balkans, people have lived with the steadfast belief that they do not live alone. Sharing their home is a domovoi, a protective household spirit deeply woven into the fabric of daily domestic life. This was not a distant god to be worshipped in a grand temple, but a cherished, if sometimes temperamental, guardian whose presence was as real as the walls of the izba, the traditional log home. The entire tradition of honoring the domovoi is a masterpiece of oral folklore, a set of practices passed from grandmother to granddaughter, from father to son, ensuring the spirit's favor and the family's prosperity through centuries of upheaval. The domovoi is often perceived as a small, bearded man covered in silky hair, sometimes bearing the features of the family's founding ancestor. He is the soul of the home, intrinsically tied to the physical dwelling itself. He rarely speaks but makes his presence known through small sounds, a quiet sigh, the creak of a floorboard, or the rustle of straw in the attic where he was believed to reside. His temperament directly reflected the household's well-being. A content domovoi would perform small chores at night, groom the livestock, warn the family of impending danger through dreams, and ensure general prosperity. An offended or neglected domovoi, however, could become a poltergeist, hiding keys, breaking dishes, pulling blankets off sleepers, or even tangling a woman's hair into impossible knots. This belief system created a powerful moral and practical code. A harmonious and clean home was a spiritually protected home, and disrespect within the family could anger their most important guardian. Appeasing this spirit required a precise set of rituals and offerings, a knowledge base meticulously preserved through oral tradition. There was no official priesthood for the domovoi. The wisdom was kept alive by the matriarchs of the family. When a new house was built, a crucial ritual involved inviting the domovoi to take residence. A family member would go to their old home, open the stove, the spiritual heart of the dwelling, and coax the spirit into a pot or a boot, carrying him to the new location where he would be warmly welcomed with a bowl of porridge left by the new stove. This ensured the ancestral protection moved with the family. Regular offerings were essential. Before every major meal, a small portion of the first bite or a spoonful of soup would be placed behind the stove for him. At key points in the agricultural year, especially after the harvest, a bowl of kusha, a sweet grain pudding, would be left out overnight as a thank you gift. This knowledge was transmitted through subtle, everyday actions and stories. A grandmother, while cooking, would quietly set aside a morsel for the domovoi, showing her grandchildren the practice without needing to lecture them. Children were taught specific behaviors: never swear or argue loudly in the house, never bring a quarrel indoors, and always leave the home clean at night. These weren't just rules of etiquette, they were directives for coexisting peacefully with a sensitive spiritual roommate. Folktales were the primary vehicle for the deeper lessons. Parents would tell stories of families who prospered because they respected their domovoi, and chilling tales of those who failed to do so and faced ruin. This oral tradition ensured that the abstract concept of a household spirit remained a practical, immediate, and undeniable part of daily existence for each new generation. What is most remarkable about the domovoi tradition is its incredible resilience in the face of monumental change. With the arrival of Christianity, the established church often attempted to demonize these pagan household spirits, classifying them as minor devils. But the oral tradition was too deeply ingrained to be erased. Instead, it adapted brilliantly. People began to believe that only those who died outside of God's grace, perhaps through suicide or without last rites, became restless spirits, subtly Christianizing the old belief. The domovoi found a way to coexist with saints, and the offerings behind the stove continued, even as icons were placed on the wall. Then came the 20th century and the official state atheism of the Soviet Union, which sought to stamp out all superstition. Yet, in countless villages and even city apartments, babushkas continued the old ways in secret, whispering the stories to their grandchildren and leaving out a piece of bread at night, preserving a fragile, unbroken thread of memory that has survived into the modern day. a testament to the power of tradition whispered from one generation to the next within the sacred space of the home. While the domovoi watched over the Slavic home on the vast and ancient continent of Australia, an even more profound connection to place was being maintained through what is perhaps humanity's most epic and enduring creation myth, the Aboriginal Dreamtime. For the first Australians, the world was not formed by distant gods and then abandoned. It remains a living, breathing testament to a sacred past that is eternally present. The Dreamtime, or dreaming, refers to that primordial era when ancestral spirit beings emerged from a formless earth and began to travel across the land, shaping its mountains, rivers, and deserts through their epic journeys, battles, and creations. At the end of their travels, these beings did not die but transformed into features of the landscape: a rock formation, a waterhole, a cluster of trees, infusing the entire continent with spiritual power and a timeless narrative. This isn't a story that happened once, it is a continuing reality, and its preservation for over 60,000 years is one of the greatest feats of human memory and cultural transmission. The primary mechanism for this incredible preservation is the songline or dreaming track. A songline is far more than a path. It is a sung narrative map of the ancestral being's journey across the land. Each landmark along the route, every hill, every bend in a river, every distinctive tree is encoded within a specific verse of a song, a stanza in an epic poem that stretches for hundreds, sometimes thousands of kilometers. The rhythm and melody of the song function as a mnemonic device, an oral GPS that holds the directions and the sacred lore associated with each place. An elder from one community could sing a songline they had never physically traveled before and know precisely where to find water, where certain medicinal plants grew, and where it was safe to camp, simply by recalling the lyrics passed down to them. This intricate knowledge system allowed for safe passage and communication across vast distances, connecting different language groups through a shared, sung geography. The song itself was the title deed to the land, a living legal document that proved a group's deep spiritual connection to their country. This knowledge was not entrusted to a single person, but was collectively held and performed by the entire community, ensuring its survival. Ceremonial gatherings or corroborees were vital for this cross-generational transfer. During these events, elders would lead the community in singing the cycles of the dreaming stories, accompanied by the rhythmic clap of clapsticks and the deep, resonant drone of the didgeridoo. The songs were acted out through dance, with specific body paints and movements representing particular ancestors and their actions. A dancer might embody the rainbow serpent weaving across the ground, his movements tracing the creature's path in creating a river system. Through this multi-sensory experience, song, dance, and art, the younger members of the community didn't just hear the stories, they absorbed them into their very beings, learning the precise gestures, pitches, and rhythms that ensured the tradition's accuracy. It was a total immersion in cultural memory, repeated throughout a lifetime. Further anchoring these stories to the earth itself is the world's oldest continuous artistic tradition, rock art. Across Australia, from the Kimberley to Arnhem Land, galleries of paintings adorn sandstone shelters, some created tens of thousands of years ago and meticulously repainted by successive generations. This was not mere decoration, it was a form of sacred writing. Certain paintings depicted the ancestral beings themselves, like the Wandjina sky spirits with their haloed heads and large dark eyes. Others served as maps illustrating the path of a songline or the location of a vital resource. The act of repainting a fading image was not just restoration. It was an act of worship, a ritual of renewal that maintained the spiritual power or birthing of that place and the story it held. This physical interaction with the art ensured that the symbols and their meanings remained vivid and correctly interpreted, generation after generation. The resilience of this tradition in the face of brutal colonization is a powerful testament to its depth. When European settlers arrived, they dismissed the dreaming as primitive myth and systematically disrupted the ceremonies and the freedom to travel songlines. Yet the knowledge endured. Elders became clandestine librarians, continuing to sing the songs quietly and pass the stories on, even when they were forced from their traditional land. In modern times, this has led to a powerful cultural renaissance. Aboriginal communities are now using digital technology to record their elders singing songlines, creating interactive maps that layer the ancient songs over satellite imagery, preserving them with a new permanence for future generations. This seamless fusion of the world's oldest oral tradition with cutting-edge technology proves that the dreaming is not a relic of the past, but a dynamic, living law that continues to guide, define, and protect the world's oldest continuous culture. This sacred task of preservation fell to specific lineages of Brahmin priests who treated the Vedas not as literature to be read, but as divine sound to be perfectly embodied. From a very young age, boys would be apprenticed to a guru, often their own father or grandfather, beginning a lifelong commitment to memorization. The process was one of intense, meticulous oral transmission. The student would sit closely with the teacher, who would chant a line or a single word with its exact pronunciation, pitch, and rhythm. The student's role was to listen with absolute focus and then replicate the sound exactly with no deviation. They did not learn by reading texts, they learned by absorbing and reproducing vibrations, echoing the sounds they heard until they were etched into their very neural pathways. This Guru Shishya Parampara, the master-disciple lineage, was the unbreakable chain that ensured the Vedas were passed down with zero corruption for hundreds of generations. The sheer scale of this memorization is almost incomprehensible. The core texts of the Rigveda alone contain over 1,000 hymns, made up of roughly 10,600 verses. To safeguard this colossal amount of information against the erosion of time and human error, the Brahmins developed an ingenious set of auxiliary techniques, often called the Vedangas or limbs of the Veda. These were not alternative texts but complex recitational methods that acted as error-checking mechanisms. The most basic form was the Samhita Patha, the continuous recitation of the verses as composed. But then, to ensure perfect preservation, they would chant the same text in deliberately modified patterns. The Padapatha involved breaking down the continuous Sanskrit compound words into their individual separate words in sequence. The Kramapatha took this further, chanting in a step-by-step pattern, word 1 with word 2 with word 3 with word 4, and so on. More complex methods like the Jotapatha and Ganapatha wove the words into intricate patterns of repetition and reversal, creating a braided or convoluted recitation that was incredibly difficult to master but made any mistake immediately obvious. Mastering the Ganapatha, the most complex form, is said to take over a dozen years of dedicated practice. A priest who could recite a Veda in all these different forms had essentially created a built-in verification system. If all the paths led back to the same original text, the transmission was flawless. This was a system of oral preservation so robust and mathematically precise that it functioned with the accuracy of a modern digital checksum, all maintained within the human mind. This profound understanding of sound extended to its very production. The priests believed that the efficacy of the hymns resided not just in the words, but in their sonic quality, the specific pitch, rhythm, and even the articulation of each syllable. Sanskrit is a language of vibration, and each sound is thought to have a specific effect on consciousness and reality. The tonal patterns, known as swaras, were not musical in a casual sense. They were fixed and obligatory with three primary tones, the Udatta raised, Anudatta not raised, and Svarita sounded. Chanting a verse with the wrong swara was not just a mistake, it was believed to nullify the ritual's power or even bring misfortune. This sacred science of sound, preserved through this unbroken oral tradition, is why when you hear a Vedic chant today, whether in a temple in Tamil Nadu or a university in California, you are hearing the exact same syllables, the same pauses, the same rise and fall of pitch that was heard over 3 millennia ago on the banks of the Indus River, a living sonic artifact of breathtaking precision. But traditions born from a poet's despair are not the only ones that weave together community, memory, and protection. Let's sail now to the waterways of southern China, where every 5th day of the 5th lunar month, the air crackles with the thunder of drums and the determined splash of paddles cutting through water. This is the Dragon Boat Festival, or Duan Wu Jai, a vibrant, multifaceted holiday whose origins are steeped in the tragic and romanticized tale of Yuan, a patriotic poet and minister from the ancient state of Chu during the Warring States period. Yuan was a loyal advisor who fought against corruption and advocated for wise policies. But when his king ignored his counsel and allied with a treacherous rival state, Yuan was unjustly banished from court. In his exile, he composed some of China's most enduring and beautiful poetry, pouring his love for his country and his despair at its impending downfall into his verses. The legend says that when he finally received news that his worst fears had come true, that the capital of Chu had been conquered, he waded into the Miluo River, clasping a heavy stone to his chest, and drowned himself as a final, ultimate protest against the injustice that had befallen his homeland. The story doesn't end with his death, it begins there. The local people who admired and loved Yuan were devastated. They rushed out in their fishing boats, desperately beating drums and splashing the water with their paddles to scare away evil spirits and fish from devouring his body. To appease the river dragons and feed Yuan's spirit, they began throwing packets of sticky rice wrapped in bamboo leaves into the water. This heartfelt, spontaneous reaction of a grieving community is the mythical seed from which the festival's 3 most iconic traditions grew: the dragon boat races, the eating of zongzi, and the practice of protective rituals. It's a powerful example of how a historical or legendary event can crystallize into a set of cultural practices that endure for millennia, each element a symbolic echo of that original moment of loss and devotion. The most public and thrilling of these traditions is, of course, the dragon boat racing. These are not simple canoe outings, they are highly synchronized, intensely competitive team endeavors. The boats themselves are magnificent works of folk art, painted with vibrant scales and adorned with a fearsome dragon's head at the prow and a tail at the stern. The racing team consists of 20 paddlers sitting in pairs, a drummer at the front who sets the furious pace with their beats, and a steersperson at the back guiding the long, narrow vessel. The pounding drum is the heart of the race, its rhythm coordinating the paddlers' strokes into a single, powerful, unified motion that makes the boat seem to fly across the water. The spectacle is immense, drawing huge crowds and fostering a powerful sense of community spirit and shared identity. While the modern races are often large-scale international sports events, the core symbolism remains: the reenactment of that original, urgent voyage to save a beloved soul. Alongside the exhilarating races is the quieter, more domestic tradition of making and eating zongzi. These are pyramid-shaped dumplings made of glutinous rice, stuffed with a variety of sweet or savory fillings like red bean paste, salted egg yolk, or marinated pork, and then wrapped tightly in bamboo or reed leaves. The preparation of zongzi is often a family affair passed down through generations. Grandmothers teach their grandchildren the precise way to fold the leaves to create a tight seal, so the rice doesn't leak during the long boiling process. Each family might have its own prized recipe for the filling or a particular wrapping technique, making their zongzi unique. This act of communal cooking and sharing is as important as eating the final product. It reinforces family bonds and serves as a tangible, edible offering of remembrance, a direct culinary link to those first rice packets thrown into the Miluo River. The third pillar of the festival is perhaps the most pervasive yet personal, the array of protective rituals designed to ward off evil and disease. The fifth lunar month was traditionally considered an unlucky time, a period when poisonous creatures were active and malevolent forces were strong. The Dragon Boat Festival became a day for a great annual cleansing. People would hang bundles of specific plants, mugwort and calamus, over their doors. These aromatic herbs were believed to repel insects and evil spirits with their sharp scent. Adults might drink realga wine, a potent concoction thought to detoxify the body and ward off snakes. For children, the protections were even more elaborate. Parents would sew small, fragrant pouches filled with spices and herbs for them to wear, and some would even draw the character for king on their children's foreheads with realga wine, believing it would make them as strong and protected as a tiger. These practices show how the festival seamlessly blended its core myth of remembrance with ancient, practical folk beliefs about health and safety. What makes the Dragon Boat Festival a truly stunning example of cultural transmission is its remarkable journey across the globe with the Chinese diaspora. Wherever Chinese communities have settled, from the bustling Chinatowns of San Francisco and New York to the vibrant communities in Singapore, Malaysia, and Vancouver, the festival has taken root. It has become a powerful anchor of cultural identity, a way for people far from their ancestral homeland to connect with their heritage and pass it on to their children. The races are organized by local community associations, the zongzi are sold in shops and made in homes, and the protective charms are still discussed. The tradition has proven to be incredibly adaptable. While the core elements remain sacred, local ingredients might find their way into zongzi fillings, and races might be held on different types of waterways. This flexibility within a firm structure is the hallmark of a living tradition, one that doesn't just remember the past but actively shapes a community's present and future, ensuring that the story of Yuan's sacrifice and the people's devotion continues to be told for generations to come. Yet the survival of Arthurian legend owes just as much to the quiet, diligent work within the scriptoria of medieval monasteries. As the age of the wandering bard began to wane, these religious institutions became the new guardians of the past. Monastic scribes, laboring by candlelight, undertook the colossal task of preserving secular stories they may have personally considered pagan fancies, recognizing their immense cultural value. Their work was one of translation and transcription, meticulously copying older Welsh and Breton texts into Latin, and later into vernacular languages like French and English. The most famous of these compilations is Geoffrey of Monmouth's History of the Kings of Britain, written in the 12th century. Though presented as a factual history, this work was a fantastical tapestry weaving together earlier oral traditions, creating a coherent and majestic narrative for King Arthur that captured the imagination of all of Europe. It was here, in these quiet halls of faith, that the oral tales were granted a new kind of immortality on the written page, ensuring they would not be lost to time. This written foundation then sparked a second great wave of preservation and evolution, led by the Romantic writers of the 12th and 13th centuries. French poets like Chrétien de Troyes encountered these Latin histories and saw within them not just chronicles, but the raw material for a new art form, the chivalric romance. These authors, often working under the patronage of noblewomen like Helena of Aquitaine, took the core characters and infused them with the contemporary ideals of courtly love and Christian chivalry. It was Chrétien who first introduced the world to Lancelot and his adulterous love for Queen Guinevere, and who popularized the mystical quest for the Holy Grail. These additions were not distortions of the original myth, but rather a brilliant adaptation, translating ancient Celtic heroism into a language of virtue and spiritual pursuit that resonated deeply with the medieval mind. The legend was not being frozen, it was being refined, its core elements of heroism, betrayal, and the search for a better world continually repolished to shine for a new audience. This process of adaptation reveals the incredible resilience of the myth's core architecture. Whether in an ancient Welsh poem, a monastic chronicle, or a French romance, certain elements remained stubbornly consistent, acting as the legend's bedrock. The figure of Arthur himself as the once and future king, the boy of humble birth who rises to greatness, the magical sword Excalibur, drawn from stone or given by the Lady of the Lake, symbolizing divine right and sacred sovereignty. The dream of Camelot as a perfect yet tragically fragile kingdom of justice and peace. And finally, the poignant prophecy of Arthur's eventual return in his people's darkest hour. These were the timeless, powerful symbols that every storyteller, from the earliest bard to the latest novelist, felt compelled to retain. They are the reason the legend feels familiar even when encountered in a vastly different telling, a testament to the enduring power of its fundamental truths. The tradition's journey did not end in the Middle Ages. It entered a new golden age with Victorian poets like Alfred, Lord Tennyson, whose Idylls of the King reinterpreted the saga through a moralistic lens, and it continues to thrive today in films, novels, and television series. Each era finds its own Arthur, reflecting its own anxieties and aspirations, yet always circling back to those original, potent themes. The uninterrupted life of the Arthurian legend, from oral tales to global phenomenon, stands as a powerful testament to human collaboration across centuries. It is a myth preserved not by a single method, but by the sequential dedication of bards, scribes, and poets, each group ensuring the flame was passed on, never to be extinguished. Long after the fires of the bardic halls had cooled, in the deep, dark winters of the north, another kind of tradition was taking root, one born from humanity's primal struggle against the cold and the endless night. Before there was Christmas, there was Yule, a 12-day midwinter festival observed across ancient Scandinavia and Germania. This was not a gentle season of gift-giving, but a precarious, dangerous time when the sun seemed to waver on the edge of oblivion and the barriers between the worlds grew terrifyingly thin. To survive this period, communities developed a rich tapestry of customs, not merely for celebration, but for protection and ensuring the sun's return. And these traditions proved so powerful that they were seamlessly woven into the fabric of Christmas itself, preserved through the unwavering rhythm of family life. The most formidable and awe-inspiring of these beliefs was that of the wild hunt, known as Oscorea or Jolaria. This was no simple ghost story. It was a deeply held conviction that during the longest nights of the year, a spectral, thunderous procession led by the god Odin himself would tear across the sky. Mounted on his 8-legged steed Sleipnir, Odin, often referred to as Jolnir, the Yule figure, would lead a host of the dead, lost souls, and supernatural creatures through the gale-force winds. The sound was said to be deafening, the baying of hounds, the blaring of horns, and the furious galloping of horses. To witness the wild hunt was considered a dire omen, often foretelling war, plague, or death. The folk custom was to stay safely indoors with your family, to bring offerings to the doorstep for the passing spirits, and above all, to never look directly at the procession lest you be snatched away into the void. This belief enforced a communal hunkering down, a gathering of the clan around the hearth for mutual protection, reinforcing the very social bonds that ensured survival through the winter. The heart of that protection was the hearth itself and its central feature, the Yule log. This was no ordinary piece of firewood. Selecting and preparing the log was a sacred family ritual. The chosen log, often a thick piece of ash or oak, would be specially chosen and brought into the home with great ceremony. It would be decorated with evergreen boughs, sprinkled with mead or cider as an offering, and sometimes carved with runes for protection and prosperity. The master of the house would then light it from the embers of the previous year's log, creating a tangible, fiery connection to past generations. The primary rule was that it must burn slowly and continuously for the entire 12 days of Yule. Its light and heat were a symbolic stand-in for the absent sun, a tiny, defiant beacon against the overwhelming darkness. The ashes were never simply discarded, they were considered powerfully protective. Families would scatter them in their fields to ensure a fertile spring harvest, or keep them in the home to guard against lightning strikes and evil spirits throughout the coming year. The Yule log was a beautiful, practical symbol of hope and continuity, its enduring flame a promise that the light would always return. This theme of protection extended to every corner of the home through the custom of julewerk or Yule work. This involved crafting a host of protective charms and ornaments, primarily from the materials of nature that defiantly stayed green during the death of winter, straw and evergreens. Women and children would spend the dark evenings weaving intricate julegjörder, Yule fences from straw. These were not decorations in a modern sense, they were symbolic barriers placed on windowsills and around the hearth to fence out malevolent spirits and fence in the family's good fortune for the coming year. They also fashioned julebuk, Yule goats from straw, a creature associated with the thunder god Thor and his two chariot-pulling goats, Tangrisnir and Tangjoster. These goats symbolized fertility and the promise of the harvest to come. Alongside these, they would bring in boughs of juniper and pine to sweep the house clean of negative energy, and then hang over doors and windows, their sharp, cleansing scent believed to purify the air and repel ill-intentioned beings. When Christianity arrived in the North, it did not simply erase these ancient practices. Instead, it engaged in a brilliant, calculated act of cultural absorption. Church leaders, recognizing the deep-rooted power of these traditions, strategically placed the celebration of Christ's birth atop the existing Yule festival. The terrifying wild hunt was gradually recast. Its leader was sometimes demonized or transformed into a more Christianized figure, but the underlying admonition to stay indoors with family on holy nights remained. The Yule log symbolism was gently shifted from a sun substitute to a representation of the light of Christ entering the world. The protective straw ornaments lost none of their potency but were given new homes. The Yule goat, for instance, eventually became a companion figure to the newly introduced Santa Claus or julenissen. The family-centric nature of the rituals made them incredibly resilient. The knowledge of how to weave the straw fences, the recipe for the special Yule ale, the stories told to explain why you must never let the fire go out, these were not decreed by the church or the state. They were the domain of the household, passed from parent to child by the flickering light of that very same hearth, ensuring that the oldest winter magic of the North continues to warm our modern celebrations. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic Ocean, another civilization was mastering time itself, viewing it not as a linear progression but as a sacred, cyclical force woven into the fabric of the cosmos. The ancient Maya developed one of the most sophisticated and complex calendar systems in human history, a system so precise it could track the movements of Venus with an error margin of just 2 hours over 500 years. For the Maya, time was not an abstract measurement. It was a living entity, a divine current made up of overlapping cycles, each with its own spiritual energy and influence. This profound understanding was not public knowledge but a sacred science, meticulously guarded by a class of astronomer priests known as the Arkin, the keepers of the days. Their role was to interpret these cycles, and the survival of this knowledge through the brutal Spanish conquest is a stunning testament to the resilience of hidden oral traditions. The Spanish arrival in the 16th century marked the beginning of a systematic campaign to eradicate Mayan culture, viewing their spiritual texts and practices as diabolical. Catholic missionaries, most notably Bishop Diego de Landa, orchestrated the burning of thousands of Mayan codices, beautiful, bark paper books filled with astronomical data, ritual knowledge, and historical records. In a single, catastrophic auto-da-fe in the town of Mani in 1562, countless irreplaceable texts were consumed by flames, an act Landa himself described as destroying a vast number of books which we burned because they contained nothing but superstition and lies of the devil. To the outside observer, it appeared the Maya had been severed from their past, their intellectual and spiritual heritage erased in a pyre of religious fervor. But the Spanish had underestimated the depth of the tradition. The knowledge of the calendar and its prophecies was not solely contained within those codices. The true repository was the meticulously trained memory of the Akin and the secret oral lineages they sustained. In the wake of the destruction, these priestly families made a fateful decision: they would go underground. Public ceremonies were abandoned and the visible symbols of their faith were hidden away. But in the privacy of their homes, deep in the jungle or within remote village communities, the teaching continued. A father would quietly take his son aside and begin the arduous process of passing down the counts. They used the Spanish-introduced European calendar not as a replacement, but as a shield and a cipher. Its familiar dates became a public-facing mask behind which they could continue to calculate the sacred Tzolk'in, the 260-day ritual calendar, and the long count, the vast cycle measuring thousands of years. The preservation method was a masterpiece of clandestine coding. The Akin embedded the complex calendar mathematics within everyday practices, most notably within the text of prayers and the rituals of traditional Maya Catholicism, which blended surface-level Christian saints with deep-rooted indigenous beliefs. A prayer to a saint might secretly reference the specific energy of a day in the Tzolk'in. The planting of crops, the diagnosis of illness, and the arrangement of marriages all continued to be guided by the ancient calendar, but this guidance was now whispered, its true source concealed from the colonial authorities. This oral transmission was so precise that when the ancient calendar systems were rediscovered by modern archaeologists centuries later, they found that the dates being calculated by the secretive day keepers in remote Guatemalan highlands aligned perfectly with the inscriptions on crumbling stone stelae that had been abandoned for 1,000 years. This hidden continuity is perhaps most famously and controversially connected to the cycle that captured the world's imagination, the completion of the 13th Bacton cycle of the long count, which corresponded to December 21, 2012. While popular culture spun tales of an apocalyptic end of the world, modern Maya day keepers who still maintain the tradition spoke of it not as an end, but as a much rarer and more significant event, a completion, a turning over of a great cycle, and an opportunity for renewal and a new beginning. The fact that this interpretation and the precise calculation itself survived half a millennium of suppression is the ultimate proof of the tradition's power. It was not preserved in stone or in books, but in the silent, steadfast determination of generations of fathers and sons, mothers and daughters, who chose to become living libraries, safeguarding the rhythm of the cosmos itself within the quiet hum of their own memories. While the Maya preserved cosmic cycles in secret, another tradition was crossing an ocean not in hiding, but in the horrifying holds of slave ships clinging to life through the power of a story. From the rich oral cultures of West Africa, particularly among the Akan people of Ghana, came one of the most resilient and adaptable figures in world mythology, Anansi the spider. He is a trickster, a shapeshifter, a god of stories and wisdom who often appears as a small, clever spider who outwits larger, more powerful animals through his cunning and guile. These tales were far more than simple entertainment. They were a sophisticated cultural technology. They taught moral lessons about using one's wits over brute strength. They explained the origins of the world, and they subtly critiqued authority and social norms. When millions of Africans were forcibly taken to the Americas during the transatlantic slave trade, in the harrowing journey known as the Middle Passage, they brought Anansi with them, not in their meager possessions, but locked safely in the vault of collective memory. The survival of these stories under the brutal conditions of slavery is nothing short of a miracle. Enslaved people were systematically stripped of their languages, their families, their religions, and their names in an effort to break their spirit and sever their connection to their homeland. But the stories proved unbreakable. Anansi, the ultimate survivor, was the perfect hero for a people living under unimaginable oppression. Telling his tales became a covert act of cultural preservation and psychological resistance. Under the watchful eyes of overseers who might punish them for speaking in their native tongues, the stories began to transform. The clever spider, so specific to the Akan tradition, often morphed into a more generic but equally clever animal that would be familiar in the new American landscape, the rabbit. And so, in the hush arbors and dimly lit cabins of plantations across the American South, a new hero was born from an ancient one, Biara Rabbit. The parallels between Anansi and Biara Rabbit are profound. Both are small, physically weak creatures in a world of dangerous predators. Anansi outwits leopard, python, and tiger. Biara Rabbit outsmarts Biara Fox, Biara Wolf, and Biara Bear. Both use their intelligence to turn the tables on their powerful adversaries, often employing reverse psychology and clever traps. In a classic Anansi tale, he might trick a group of animals into believing there is a famine so he can eat all the food himself. In the corresponding Biara Rabbit story, he famously begs Biara Fox not to throw him into the briar patch, knowing full well it is the one place he can escape to safety. The core message remained identical for the enslaved audiences. The weak can overcome the strong through intelligence and trickery. These stories were a manual for survival, a coded language that taught the value of mental agility in the face of overwhelming physical power. The mechanism of preservation was the deeply intimate, intergenerational act of oral storytelling. At the end of a punishing day of labor, elders would gather the children and begin the tales with a familiar call and response. The storyteller might say, "I'm going to tell you a story about Biara Rabbit," and the listeners would respond, "Yes, tell it." This participatory structure ensured everyone was engaged and helped lock the story's sequence in place. The stories were performed, not just recited. The teller would use different voices for each character, employ gestures, and use rhythmic patterns that made the tales unforgettable. Grandmothers told grandchildren, who grew up and told their own children, creating an unbroken chain that stretched back across the ocean to a homeland most had never seen. This was how a people without written histories, without freedom, and without rights maintained their identity and passed their deepest values on to the next generation. The tradition's power was definitively captured in the late 19th century by a man named Joel Chandler Harris, a white journalist who had heard these stories from enslaved people on the plantation where he worked as a young man. Harris collected and published them in a series of books written in a heavy, and now controversial, dialect using the narrator Uncle Remus. While Harris's work introduced Biara Rabbit to a global audience, it also filtered the tales through a sentimental, post-Civil War lens that often softened the harsh reality of their origins. For the African American community, however, the stories never lost their original edge and meaning. Throughout the 20th century, the figure of the trickster remained vital, evolving yet again into the charismatic, fast-talking hero of urban folklore like Signifying Monkey, who uses his wit and words to overcome stronger opponents. The journey of Anansi from the forests of West Africa to the plantations of America and into modern global consciousness stands as a breathtaking testament to the fact that the most powerful survival tool is not a weapon, but a well-told story. While the Maya and the enslaved Africans preserved their traditions against immense external pressure, another culture was mastering the art of joyful, defiant continuity, turning the new year into a profound act of cultural reaffirmation. Nowruz, which simply means new day, is the ancient Persian New Year, a celebration that marks the spring equinox and has been observed for over 3,000 years. Its roots stretch back to the Zoroastrian religion of pre-Islamic Persia, a faith centered on the eternal struggle between light and darkness and the ultimate triumph of good. Nowruz is far more than a single day of festivity. It is a nearly 2-week-long tapestry of rituals, each one rich with symbolic meaning, meticulously preserved by Persian families from Iran and Azerbaijan to Afghanistan and Tajikistan and across the global diaspora. It is a tradition that has survived empires, conquests, and religious transformations, not by resisting change, but by absorbing new influences while holding fast to its ancient, life-affirming core. The heart of the Norse celebration and its most beautiful visual expression is the half-scene table. This is a carefully arranged display of 7 specific items, each one beginning with the Persian letter S scene, and each representing a hope or blessing for the coming year. The arrangement is a family affair, often led by the grandmother, who teaches the symbolic significance of each item as she places it on the spread. The core 7 are sabze, sprouted wheat or lentil greens for rebirth and renewal, samanu, a sweet pudding for wealth and affluence, senged dried olaster fruit for love, sia, garlic for medicine and health, sebe, apple for beauty and health, somak, sumac, berries for the sunrise and the victory of light over darkness, and sirke, vinegar for patience and age. Beyond these 7, families add other symbolic items: a mirror to reflect the past year, a goldfish in a bowl to represent life, painted eggs for fertility, and coins for prosperity. Some also include a book of poetry, often the Divan of Hafez, or the Zoroastrian holy book, the Avesta, connecting the celebration directly to its cultural and spiritual roots. The half-scene is not a mere centerpiece, it is a sacred, symbolic universe on a table, a visual prayer for a blessed year to come, and its preparation is a primary vehicle for passing this intricate knowledge to the next generation. The festivities truly ignite with Chahashamsari, the festival of fire, held on the last Wednesday of the outgoing year. This exhilarating event is a direct descendant of Zoroastrian reverence for fire as a symbol of purity and the divine. As the sun sets, communities gather to build bonfires in streets and parks. The central ritual involves jumping over the flames, and as they leap, they sing a traditional chant, "My yellowness to you, your redness to me." This poetic phrase is a spell of sorts, a symbolic transfer of one's pallor, sickness, and weaknesses into the fire, and taking instead the fire's redness, warmth, energy, and health. It is a collective cleansing, a purging of the hardships of the old year to make way for the renewal of the new. The evening continues with other customs like Kashok Zani, where children covered in shrouds run through the alleyways banging spoons on pots to collect treats from neighbors, a custom reminiscent of Halloween that symbolizes the chasing away of misfortune. The noise, the fire, and the communal joy create a powerful sensory experience that bonds the community together in a shared, cathartic release. The mythology of Norse is as layered as its rituals, with its origins often attributed to the legendary Persian king, Jamshid. According to the epic Shahnameh, or Book of Kings, written by the poet Ferdowsi over 1,000 years ago, Jamshid was a mythical ruler who possessed a divine radiance. He built a magnificent throne and on the day of the spring equinox ascended into the heavens on a chariot pulled by demons. His people were so awestruck by this spectacle and the brilliance of his glory shining upon the earth that they declared that day a festival, the New Day or Nowruz. This myth anchors the celebration in a foundational moment of Persian kingship and civilization, linking it to ideals of justice, prosperity, and cosmic order. The endurance of this story, recited for centuries by Persian families, ensured that the meaning of Nowruz remained tied to these ancient ideals of renewal and righteous rule, even as the world around them changed dramatically. The culmination of the 2-week celebration is Sizda Bedar, the 13th day of the new year. Persians have a traditional wariness of the number 13, considering it unlucky. To avoid any bad fortune, the entire family packs a picnic and spends the day outdoors in nature, at a park or by a stream. This act of leaving the home is a way of symbolically escaping misfortune. The final ritual of the day is the most poignant. The sabze, the sprouted greens from the half-seen table that have been growing for over 2 weeks, are taken to flowing water. Each member of the family makes a wish and then gently casts the greens into the current, letting the water carry away the past year's troubles and their own hopes for the future into the universe. It is a quiet, reflective end to the vibrant festivities, a moment of connection with nature that completes the cycle of cleansing and rebirth. This powerful combination of fire, family, food, and folklore has allowed Norse to persist as an unbroken thread of identity, a 13-day-long declaration that no matter the challenges, the light will always return, and with it, a new day. From the communal fires of Norse, we venture now to the misty lochs and rushing rivers of Scotland, where a different kind of tradition thrives, one born not of celebration but of primal caution. In a land where water is both lifeblood and a relentless, dangerous presence, Scottish families have for centuries preserved a powerful and chilling mythology centered on the kelpie, a malevolent shape-shifting water spirit. This was not mere superstition. It was a sophisticated cultural early warning system, a set of stories and rituals meticulously passed down to protect children and the unwary from the very real perils of the Scottish landscape, ensuring this ancient knowledge flowed as persistently as the rivers themselves. The kelpie is one of the most formidable figures in Celtic folklore, a predator of breathtaking cunning and power. It most commonly appears as a magnificent, sleek black horse, seemingly tame and docile, grazing peacefully by the edge of a lonely loch or a fast-moving stream. Its mane is often described as dripping with water weeds or hellish fire, and its skin is said to be cold and adhesive like wet leather. To any weary traveler or curious child, the creature seems a godsend, a chance for a rest or a thrilling ride. But this is a deadly trap. The moment a person mounts the kelpie's back, their skin fuses to it. The creature then rears up, lets out a blood-curdling scream, and gallops at an impossible speed directly into the deepest, darkest part of the water, dragging its victim to a watery grave to be devoured. In some tales, the kelpie can also take the form of a handsome man to lure young women, always with water weeds tangled in his hair. These stories were not told for simple thrills. They served a critical, practical purpose, to instill a deep, instinctual fear of solitary bodies of water, especially for children playing near the countless unsupervised lochs and burns that dot the Scottish countryside. This crucial knowledge was transmitted most effectively through the intimate, terrifying tradition of the bedtime story. On long, dark Highland nights with the wind howling outside, a Scottish grandmother would gather her grandchildren by the hearth and begin a tale. She wouldn't just describe the kelpie, she would localize it. The story would be set in the very loch the family passed on the way to market or the deep pool in the river where the children were forbidden to swim. She would use vivid, sensory details, the feeling of the kelpie's clammy skin, the sound of its ghastly scream echoing across the water, the sight of its eyes glowing like hot coals. This personalized telling transformed a general myth into a specific, immediate warning. The lesson was unambiguous and unforgettable. Never approach a lone horse by the water, never wander too close to the edge, and never, ever trust a stranger near a lonely place. This oral tradition ensured that the warning was not an abstract rule but a visceral, emotionally charged memory, passed from one generation to the next in the safest of spaces, so they would be prepared for the dangers of the outside world. The cautionary tales were further cemented into the very geography of Scotland through the enduring power of place names. All across the country, locations bear silent witness to this belief. A deep, dark pool in a river might be named Linn na Duib, meaning Pool of the Black One, or a treacherous stretch of water might be called Qua na Ich Uist, the quarry of the water horse. These names functioned as permanent, communal warning signs long before official ones existed. A parent pointing out such a place to their child was not giving a history lesson, they were imparting a vital survival instruction. The name itself became a shorthand, a one-word story that evoked the entire terrifying narrative of the kelpie and its drowning victims. This practice wove the mythological directly into the practical, ensuring that the landscape itself became a teacher, its every feature reinforcing the lessons told by the hearth. Beyond stories and names, families also preserved specific, practical rituals for protection should one ever encounter the beast. The most common and widely taught defense was to never get on a strange horse's back without first examining it. If you could get close enough, you were to feel its skin. If it was unnaturally cold and sticky, you were to flee. But the most powerful piece of protective knowledge was a specific action. It was said that if you were cunning enough to steal the kelpie's bridle, you would have power over it. A famous folktale from the River Spey tells of a young boy who did just this, forcing the captured kelpie to perform hard labor until it finally tricked him into returning the bridle and escape. This story, while a narrative, encoded a practical tactic. The kelpie's power was contained in an object, and a quick-witted human could theoretically overcome it. This nugget of hope within the terror was crucial. It transformed the kelpie from an unstoppable force of nature into a creature that could be outsmarted, empowering listeners with a sense of agency even in the face of overwhelming danger. The resilience of the kelpie legend, much like the spirit itself, has proven incredibly adaptable. With the decline of horse travel and the draining of many wetlands, the literal fear may have faded, but the story has evolved. The kelpie has been transformed in modern times into a national icon, most spectacularly represented by the towering, magnificent kelpie sculptures in Falkirk. Yet, even as a tourist attraction, the ancient warning echoes. Parents still point to the giant steel heads and tell their children the old stories, ensuring the core message of water safety endures. The tradition, preserved for generations through story, place, and ritual, demonstrates how our most enduring myths are often those that served our most basic needs, not to explain the cosmos, but to keep our children safe from the deep, dark water just beyond the village gate. Yet this sacred tradition was nearly shattered in the early 19th century with the arrival of American missionaries and the subsequent overthrow of the Hawaiian kingdom. The missionaries, viewing hula as a heathenish and licentious practice, successfully pressured the converted Hawaiian royalty to ban public hula performances in 1830. For decades, the practice was driven underground. This was a direct assault on the very heart of Hawaiian identity, an attempt to sever the people from their genealogical and historical memory. But the knowledge did not die. It was safeguarded by a few determined kumu hula and their loyal Homana students who became clandestine guardians of the culture. They practiced in remote valleys, hidden from sight, whispering the chants and practicing the gestures in secret. Grandparents would teach their grandchildren the old ways under the cover of night, ensuring the breath of life in the chants, was never extinguished. This underground preservation was an act of profound cultural defiance, a quiet resistance that ensured the flame of tradition, though dimmed, was never allowed to go out. The eventual revival of hula is a testament to the resilience of these oral lineages. In the Hawaiian cultural renaissance that began in the 1970s, there was a powerful resurgence of interest in native language, navigation, and hula. The kumu hula, who had preserved the knowledge in secret, emerged as revered elders, now able to teach openly. They established halau hula schools across the islands and beyond, creating a structured, intergenerational system for transmission that mirrored the ancient ways but was adapted for the modern world. Today, the tradition thrives not as a static artifact but as a living, evolving practice. Annual competitions like the prestigious Merry Monarch Festival are not merely performances, they are profound enactments of cultural memory, where thousands of hours of meticulous training are displayed in movements that tell the stories of the volcano goddess Pele, the navigator Moi, and the creation of the islands themselves. The survival of hula and oli, from forbidden practice to global symbol of aloha, stands as a powerful testament to the fact that the most vital histories are not always written in books, but are often carried in the breath of a chant, the movement of a hand, and the unwavering determination of families to remember who they are. In the Fertile Crescent between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, the ancient Mesopotamians saw a world teeming with invisible, malevolent forces. For them, illness, misfortune, and sudden death were not random events but the direct result of demonic attack, and at the top of this terrifying hierarchy was the queen of demons herself, Lamashtu. Unlike other spirits who might be appeased, Lamashtu was pure, undiluted malice. She was depicted as a monstrous hybrid with a lioness's head, a donkey's ears, long fingernails, and taloned feet, often shown standing on a donkey, nursing a dog and a pig, creatures considered unclean. Her primary targets were the most vulnerable. She stalked pregnant women to steal their unborn children, murdered newborns in their cribs, and sickened infants to drink their blood. The fear she inspired was palpable and pervasive, a constant shadow over the household. To combat this existential threat, the Babylonians and Assyrians developed one of history's first and most sophisticated systems of apotropaic magic, rituals specifically designed to ward off evil, and they had a powerful new technology to preserve it, the cuneiform clay tablet. The primary weapons in this spiritual war were the incantation bowl and the amulet. Families would commission a priest or exorcist, known as an ashapu, to create a protective bowl. These terracotta vessels were inscribed on the inside with a spiraling, binding incantation written in cuneiform, often in a spiral to trap the demon. The bowl would then be buried upside down at the entrance to a home or under its threshold, creating a magical barrier designed to capture any demonic intruders. Similarly, amulets were fashioned from materials like bronze, stone, or precious gems, carved with images of protective deities like the lion-headed demon Pazuzu, Lamashtu's fierce rival, and inscribed with concise spells. A mother might wear one around her neck or hang it above her child's bed as a constant shield. What makes these practices so revolutionary for their time was their method of preservation. The ashapu did not rely on memory alone. He maintained extensive libraries of standardized spells, meticulously impressing the complex rituals and incantations onto damp clay tablets. These tablets, once fired, became permanent, error-proof repositories of knowledge. They ensured that the exact wording of a spell, which was believed to hold intrinsic power, could be replicated perfectly for centuries. The survival of thousands of these tablets allows us to hear the echoes of their ancient fears and the precise formulas they used to fight them. This vast body of Mesopotamian magical knowledge did not vanish with the fall of the empires that created it. Its next chapter began during the Babylonian exile in the 6th century BCE, when a significant population of Judeans were displaced from their homeland and resettled in Mesopotamia. Living in close proximity to Babylonian culture, these exiled scholars and priests were exposed to its advanced conceptions of demonology and magical practice. They began to adopt and adapt these ideas, weaving them into their own evolving religious framework. Babylonian protective spells found new life in Jewish mystical texts, their formulas translated into Aramaic and Hebrew, and their purposes aligned with the worship of a single, all-powerful God. The figure of Lamashtu, for instance, may have influenced the later Jewish folkloric figure of Lilith, the first wife of Adam who was transformed into a child-stealing demoness. The core technique of inscribing binding incantations on bowls continued unabated in Jewish communities for centuries, with Aramaic inscriptions often invoking the power of angels and God to trap demons just as their Babylonian predecessors had. This flow of ideas continued to ripple outward with the rise of Islam in the 7th century. Muslim scholars who preserved and built upon the scientific and philosophical knowledge of the ancient world also engaged deeply with its occult traditions. The vast corpus of Babylonian and later Hellenistic magic was translated into Arabic and studied within Islamic mystical circles, particularly those devoted to Sufism. The concept of protective amulets took on a new form, evolving into the tawiz, a small, sealed pouch or metal case containing a verse from the Quran or a prayer written on a piece of paper. The power was no longer in the image of a demon like Pazuzu, but in the sacred word of God, yet the underlying principle of wearing a physical object to deflect evil remained identical. Furthermore, the complex Babylonian system of astrology, which was deeply intertwined with their demonology, was wholeheartedly embraced and refined by Islamic scholars, who saw the movements of the planets as another form of divine writing to be interpreted for both spiritual and protective purposes. This unbroken chain, from the cuneiform tablets of Babylon to the prayer amulets of the Islamic world, demonstrates a remarkable journey of cultural adaptation. A ritual designed to pacify a monstrous, child-eating demoness was not simply discarded by monotheistic faiths, it was reinvented. The methods of the Ashapu were sanctified, their techniques repurposed to serve a single deity. The clay tablet gave way to parchment and paper, cuneiform symbols transformed into sacred scripts, and the names of ancient demons were replaced by the names of angels and prophets. Yet the fundamental human desire for protection against the unseen, and the belief that words and objects could form a shield against it, remained constant. This tradition survived not through isolation, but through its incredible ability to be translated, both linguistically and theologically, proving that the most enduring knowledge is that which can find a new home in the human heart. But not all traditions offer guidance for the living. Some serve as messengers from the world beyond, delivering a specific, chilling warning meant for a single family. In the misty glens and rolling hills of Ireland, there exists a belief so intimately tied to bloodline that it transcends general folklore, becoming a sacred and somber inheritance. This is the tradition of the Banshee, from the Gaelic bean Shia, meaning woman of the fairy mound. Far more than a generic ghost story, the Banshee is a specific familial omen, a death messenger whose sorrowful cry is heard only by the descendants of the ancient Gaelic families she is bound to. This deeply personal mythology has been preserved not in public decrees, but within the private confines of family history, a whispered knowledge passed down through generations alongside the very funeral customs it predicts. The most defining feature of the Banshee is her voice, an unearthly, piercing wail known as kina or keening that cuts through the silence of the night. Descriptions of the sound vary from a low, mournful sigh to a shriek of such unbearable grief that it chills the blood. This auditory experience is the core of the tradition, and its precise characteristics are often family-specific lore. One family might teach their children that their banshee sounds like a woman weeping in profound despair. Another might describe it as a melodic yet terrifying lamentation. A third might hold the belief that their banshee does not cry at all, but instead rattles the window panes or knocks on the door as her signal. This precise cataloging of the warning sign is crucial. It prevents false alarms and ensures that when the sound is heard, there is no mistaking its dreadful meaning. The knowledge of what to listen for is a sacred trust passed from grandparent to grandchild, often during the storytelling hours of the evening, ensuring the next generation can recognize the omen meant for their ears alone. This tradition is inextricably linked to the ancient Irish practice of keening at funerals, where women known as Emna Quinto would lead a communal outpouring of grief through rhythmic wailing and poetic laments for the deceased. The banshee's cry is thought to be a supernatural echo of this practice, a first, otherworldly keen that precedes the mortal ones. Her appearance when she is seen is also described in ways that reflect this role. She is often depicted as a shrouded, hag-like figure with long, streaming silver hair and eyes red from endless weeping, washing the blood-stained garments of the one who will soon die. In some tales, particularly those connected to certain noble families like the O'Briens or the O'Neills, she is a beautiful, sorrowful woman in a grey cloak. This connection to the ritual of mourning grounds the supernatural event in a tangible cultural practice, making the belief more resilient and understandable within the community. The survival of this belief system through centuries of change, including the devastating Great Famine and mass emigration, is a testament to the power of the family unit as a vessel for tradition. When Irish families were scattered across the globe during the diaspora, they did not leave the banshee behind, they brought her with them in their stories. In the cramped tenements of Boston or the bustling streets of Melbourne, parents would quietly tell their children about the omen that followed their name, a haunting piece of the old country that remained their unique inheritance. There are numerous accounts from Irish Americans and Irish Australians in the 19th and 20th centuries who reported hearing the familiar cry just before a telegram arrived bearing news of a death back in Ireland. This transcontinental persistence of the phenomenon demonstrates that the tradition was not tied to a specific place, but to the people themselves. It became a way for displaced families to maintain a spiritual connection to their lineage and homeland, a somber thread of identity that not even an ocean could break. High up on the wind-swept plateaus of the Himalayas, where the air is thin and the mountains seem to touch the sky, Tibetan Buddhist monks have perfected a form of visual prayer so precise it is considered a science of the spirit. This is the art of the thangka, a sacred painting on cloth that is far more than a simple religious image. A thangka is a meditation tool, a cosmic map, a spiritual blueprint, and a vibrant portal to enlightenment, all contained within a meticulously composed frame. For over 1,000 years, the knowledge required to create these powerful objects has been safeguarded within monastery walls, passed through an unbroken lineage of master artists to their devoted apprentices in a tradition that merges unwavering discipline with profound devotion. The creation of a thangka begins not with a blank canvas and free inspiration, but with a sacred geometry so precise that a single misplaced line is believed to render the entire work spiritually inert. Before any pigment is ground, the artist must first construct the divine architecture of the painting using a complex grid of lines and measurements. This grid is based on the fundamental principles of iconometry, a set of rules that dictates the exact proportions of every deity, from the gentle curve of the Buddha's smile to the distance between his eyes. These measurements are not arbitrary, they are believed to be divinely revealed, a perfect expression of an enlightened being's form. The artist uses a knotted cord or a string coated in chalk to snap these guiding lines onto the prepared cotton or silk canvas, creating a hidden skeleton of sacred geometry. This meticulous process ensures that a Buddha painted in a monastery in India today possesses the exact same proportions as one painted in Tibet 5 centuries ago, creating a visual continuity that transcends time and space, a direct and unbroken line back to the source. Only when this flawless geometric foundation is complete can the artist begin the painstaking process of grinding minerals and stones into the vibrant pigments that bring the thangka to life. This, too, is a sacred act. The brilliant blues are made from crushed lapis lazuli, the radiant reds from cinnabar, the luminous whites from conch shell powder, and the rich gold leaf is applied with a reverent breath. Each color holds deep symbolic meaning, acting as a visual language. Blue represents the boundless, mirror-like wisdom of the Buddha mind, while red symbolizes the fierce, magnetizing energy of enlightened activity. Green is the color of compassionate action, yellow of spiritual enrichment, and white of purity and transcendence. The application of these colors follows a strict sequence, often starting with the background and moving inward toward the central deity, mirroring the meditative journey from the outer world to the inner sanctum of enlightenment. This immense body of knowledge, the grids, the pigments, the symbolism, is not found in a book that any novice can pick up. It is preserved through the guru-disciple relationship, an apprenticeship that can last a decade or more. A young boy showing artistic promise is brought into the monastery to study under a master painter, Allah Raimo Pa. His initial years are devoted not to painting but to servitude and observation. He prepares the master's canvases, grinds pigments for hours on end, and learns by watching, absorbing the sacred atmosphere of the studio. He will spend years practicing nothing but drawing the basic grid lines and the various postures of the Buddha, the asanas, until his hand moves with unconscious confidence and precision. The master imparts the knowledge orally, correcting the student's posture, his brush grip, and his mental focus, teaching him that the act of painting is itself a deep meditation. The student learns that to paint a deity with perfect compassion is to invite that deity's presence into the world. To paint a wrathful protector is to harness its power to overcome inner obstacles. The masterpiece is not the finished thanka, but the transformed mind of the artist. Upon its completion, a thanka undergoes a final, crucial ritual, consecration. The empty eyes of the deity are the last detail to be painted in, an act so sacred it is often performed by a high lama in a special ceremony. Verses are chanted, mantras are inscribed on the back of the painting, and sometimes relics are sealed behind the deity. This ritual, known as the eye-opening ceremony, is believed to transform the painting from a mere representation into a true vessel, a living residence for the deity's wisdom and blessing. From that moment on, the thanka is treated with the utmost respect, never touched with bare hands and always displayed at a height. It becomes a focal point for meditation, a guide for visualization practices, and a testament to the power of a tradition that has, for centuries, used beauty as a direct path to the divine, preserving a vision of enlightenment so precise it can be measured with a string and felt with the heart. Across the ocean, in the vibrant heart of what is now Mexico, an equally profound relationship with the departed was flourishing, one that would not be suppressed by conquest but would instead absorb it, emerging more radiant than before. Long before the Spanish galleons appeared on the horizon, the indigenous peoples of Mesoamerica, most notably the Aztecs and other Nahua groups, held a world view where life and death were not opposing forces but complementary parts of a single continuous cycle. They did not fear death, they saw it as a natural phase of existence. This philosophy was championed by the Aztec emperor himself, who was famously quoted as saying that we should not fear death, for it is as natural as life itself, and to truly live, we must always be prepared to die. This acceptance gave rise to elaborate and joyous festivals dedicated to honoring those who had passed on, creating a bridge between the worlds that was celebrated with music, food, and remembrance. The Aztec calendar was filled with rituals for the dead, but the most significant was a month-long observance dedicated to the goddess Mictlantecuhtli, the magnificent Lady of the Dead. She was depicted as a figure with a skulled face and a skirt of serpents, the queen of the Aztec underworld, Mictlan. Unlike the permanent heavens or hells of other traditions, Mictlan was a 9-level realm of gradual transformation, a challenging journey the soul undertook over 4 years, requiring specific funerary rites and items to successfully navigate. This period of mourning and guidance was crucial, but it was the annual return of the spirits that was met with public celebration. The modern 2-day celebration of Dia de Muertos is a compressed version of what were once 2 distinct Aztec festivals, one for children or Los Angelitos and one for adults, each with its own specific date in the summer. These were not somber affairs but vibrant community events filled with dancing, singing, and feasting, as families provided sustenance and comfort for the souls making their arduous annual journey back to the world of the living. The Spanish conquest in the 16th century attempted to sever this connection to the indigenous past. Catholic missionaries, horrified by what they viewed as pagan idolatry and skull worship, moved the indigenous festivals to coincide with the Catholic Triduum of All-Hallowtide, All Saints' Eve, All Saints' Day, and All Souls' Day at the beginning of November. Their goal was to transform the celebration into a more somber, European-style day of prayer and mourning for the dead. But instead of eradicating the old traditions, this move created a fascinating and powerful syncretism. The indigenous practices refused to die, they simply put on a Catholic mask. The goddess Mythical was seamlessly blended with the figure of La Catrina, the elegant skull woman who became a satirical symbol of the Mexican Revolution and later a ubiquitous icon of the holiday. The ancient belief in the soul's journey was folded into the Catholic concept of an afterlife, creating a unique theology where the memories and prayers of the living actively aided the spiritual well-being of the dead. At the very core of this blended tradition is the ofrenda, the home altar, which is a direct descendant of Aztec offering rituals. Building an ofrenda is a deeply symbolic act of love and remembrance, each layer and item carrying specific meaning rooted in ancient belief. The altar itself is often divided into tiers, symbolizing the different levels of the cosmos. It is draped with a beautiful tablecloth and meticulously decorated with cempasúchil marigolds, whose vibrant orange color and powerful scent are believed to act as a beacon, guiding the spirits home with their brilliance and fragrance. Upon it, families place photographs of their departed loved ones, along with their favorite foods and drinks: a spicy mole, sweet pan de muerto, a shot of tequila, or a simple glass of water to refresh them after their long travel. Incense, often from the copal resin sacred to the Aztecs, is burned to cleanse the space and carry prayers upward. For children's spirits, toys and sweets are added. And no ofrenda is complete without the whimsical calaveras decorated sugar skulls, often inscribed with the name of the deceased on the forehead. These are not morbid, they are celebratory, a sweet reminder of the cyclical nature of life and the individuality of each soul being honored. The entire arrangement is a masterpiece of symbolic communication, a tangible expression of the belief that the dead are not gone. They are merely on a different part of the journey, and for a brief, magical period, the veil between worlds is thin enough for them to return and enjoy the essence of the offerings left for them. This beautiful, resilient tradition has transcended its origins to become a powerful symbol of Mexican national identity and a global phenomenon. Its endurance is a direct result of its preservation within the heart of the family. The knowledge of how to build a proper ofrenda, the recipes for pan de muerto and sugar skulls, and the stories of ancestors are not taught in schools but passed down through generations in the home. A grandmother shows her granddaughter how to arrange the marigolds. A father tells his son about the uncle who loved a certain song, and in doing so, they are not just preparing for a holiday. They are engaging in an act of cultural continuity that has withstood centuries of change. The Day of the Dead teaches us that memory is the most powerful offering of all, a force that can bridge any divide, even the one between the living and the dead. Stepping out of the vibrant colors of Mexico, we find ourselves in a land of quiet forests and frozen lakes, where a different kind of sacred space offers purification and peace. In Finland, a nation with over 3 million saunas for a population of just 5.5 million people, this small, heated room is far more than a place to sweat. It is the nation's soul, a sanctuary revered for its physical and spiritual cleansing properties. For centuries, Finnish families have nurtured a unique tradition centered on the belief that this vital space is watched over by a guardian spirit, the saunatonttu, a presence that demands respect and reciprocity to ensure the well-being of all who enter. This intimate folklore, passed down through generations, transforms the simple act of bathing into a profound dialogue with the unseen world. The saunatonttu is a type of tonttu, a Finnish domestic spirit similar to a gnome or hob, but his domain is the most important room in the home. He is typically envisioned as a small, elderly man with a long beard, often formed from the steam itself. Unlike the terrifying entities of other traditions, the saunatonttu is not inherently malevolent, but he is fiercely protective of his domain and possesses a very short temper. His primary concern is the maintenance of peace, cleanliness, and proper ritual within the sauna. A family that respects these rules earns his blessing, enjoying a deeper, more restorative heat and a sense of profound tranquility. A family that offends him, however, risks his mischievous wrath, which could range from the sauna stove failing to heat properly, to more frightening pranks like splashing hot water on the bathers or even causing the logs to smoke excessively, driving everyone out. Respecting the sauna tontu requires adhering to a specific code of conduct, a set of rules woven into the fabric of Finnish family life. The most important rule is one of silence and serenity. The sauna is not a place for loud arguments, boisterous laughter, or frivolous chatter. It is a space for quiet contemplation and respectful cleansing. This practice of maintaining Hiljesu's silence is taught from a very young age, with parents gently reminding children to lower their voices as they enter. Another key prohibition is against washing laundry or any other unclean chore inside the sauna, as this defiles its sacred purpose. Perhaps the most crucial rule involves the scheduling of the sauna bath itself. Saturday night is traditionally sauna night in Finland, and it was widely believed that the sauna tontu required his own private time to bathe. Families would always reserve the first heat of the sauna for the spirit, never intruding during his allotted hour. To enter early was the gravest insult, inviting certain misfortune. Beyond behavior, families preserved the tradition through regular offerings, a practice that turned maintenance into a devotional act. The primary offering was always heat and steam, the very essence of the sauna itself. After bathing, it was customary to leave a little warm water in the bucket for the tontu to use. But the most beloved and enduring offering is a simple bowl of veli, a traditional Finnish porridge, sometimes topped with a pat of butter. This would be left on the bench or near the stove after the family's bath as a thank-you gift for the spirit's guardianship. In some tales, a specific log was always added to the fire last as an offering for the tontu to use to warm himself. Children were often given the honored task of placing the porridge, a practice that taught them from an early age about reciprocity and the importance of caring for the unseen forces that share their home. This knowledge was not written in any manual but was a vital part of the oral culture of the Finnish household, particularly the domain of grandparents. The stories told about the sauna tontu were not frightening ghost stories but practical, moral tales. A grandmother, while teaching her granddaughter how to properly ladle water onto the hot stones to create the perfect lurely steam, would tell a story about a foolish man who shouted in the sauna and found his beer had turned mysteriously warm. A grandfather splitting wood for the stove might recount a tale of a lazy farmer who tried to wash his dirty boots in the sauna and whose stove then refused to light for a full month. These narratives were not meant to terrify but to educate, embedding the rules of respect and cleanliness in memorable, relatable anecdotes that ensured the tradition was understood, not just obeyed. The resilience of the sauna tontu belief is a testament to its deep connection to Finnish identity. Even as Finland modernized and electric saunas became common, the essence of the tradition persisted. While many may no longer literally believe in a small, bearded man in the steam, the practices he inspired remain. The sauna is still treated with a hushed reverence, it is still kept impeccably clean, and the sense that it is a special, almost magical space endures. The sauna tontu has evolved from a literal spirit into a powerful cultural metaphor for the respect and care that the sauna deserves. He represents the understanding that some places are not just functional rooms but repositories of peace and tradition, and that by honoring them, we ultimately honor ourselves and the generations that came before, finding purification for both body and soul in the welcoming heat. Yet the most famous and enduring golem narrative is undoubtedly the one rooted in 16th century Prague, a story that has become the archetype for all others. This legend centers on the towering figure of Rabbi Judah Loew ben Bezalel, a renowned Talmudic scholar, mystic, and community leader. During a time of heightened persecution and blood libel accusations against the city's Jewish population, the rabbi is said to have received a divine vision instructing him to create a protector. With the assistance of two other pious men, he ventured to the banks of the Vieltova River at midnight. There, they sculpted a giant figure from the river's clay, and through a sacred ritual involving circular processions and the recitation of permutated combinations of Hebrew letters from the Sefer Yetzirah, they breathed life into the inert form. The most common version states that the word emet, meaning truth, was inscribed on its forehead to animate it. This being, the golem of Prague, was immensely strong, utterly obedient, and completely silent. It did not speak, for it possessed no neshama, no divine soul. It was a pure force of will, a servant bound to its creator's command. By day, it would appear as a large, slightly clumsy, but gentle assistant in the rabbi's household or synagogue. By night, it became an unseen guardian, patrolling the narrow lanes of the Jewish ghetto, deterring pogroms and uncovering sinister plots against the community, a silent, earthen shield against a hostile world. But these legends always carry a profound and cautionary epilogue, a critical piece of the tradition that explores the inherent danger of usurping a power meant only for the divine. The golem, lacking a soul and therefore free will, operates on pure literalism and escalating power. In many tales, the rabbi's simple, initial commands, fetch water, chop wood, grow more complex. The golem, in its relentless efficiency, might chop all the wood in the city or flood the basement with water, unable to understand the concept of enough. The most famous version of the Prague story describes how the golem itself began to grow larger and more powerful each day, its strength becoming unpredictable and its actions potentially dangerous. The breaking point often comes when the rabbi forgets to deactivate the creature for the Sabbath, the day of rest when all creative work is forbidden. The golem, left to its own devices without guidance, runs amok, threatening the very community it was built to protect. This forces the rabbi to confront his creation. In a dramatic reversal of the creation ritual, he removes or alters the sacred inscription on its forehead. By scraping away the first letter, Aleph, from the word emet, truth, it becomes met, death. The life force departs and the giant collapses back into a lifeless heap of clay, which is then hidden away in the attic of the old new synagogue in Prague, where some say its remains rest to this day, a warning forever sealed away. For centuries, these stories were not written down in popular books, but were cherished and carefully curated within the Jewish community itself. They were preserved through the intimate, oral tradition of the mace, a Yiddish term for a story or tale, often told by grandparents and parents. These narratives were shared in homes, yeshivas, and among community groups, serving as powerful pedagogical tools. They taught complex theological concepts in a relatable way: the sanctity of the Sabbath, the dangers of unchecked power, the ethical limits of human ambition, and the profound distinction between human creation, which can only rearrange existing matter, and divine creation, which creates ex nihilo from nothing. The golem was a walking, pounding parable about the responsibility that comes with knowledge. During times of extreme persecution, the stories also provided a potent psychological comfort. The fantasy of a powerful, silent defender alleviated the community's sense of vulnerability, offering a symbolic resistance against overwhelming forces. The golem represented the hope that they too, through their faith, wisdom, and unity, could summon the strength to survive. The tradition's journey into the modern world is a testament to its powerful adaptability. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the golem legend was rediscovered and retold by non-Jewish writers and filmmakers, most notably in German expressionist cinema. While these versions often exoticized the story, they introduced the archetype to a global audience, where it became a clear forerunner to characters like Frankenstein's monster and later superheroes and robots. Within Jewish culture, the golem has taken on new life as a rich subject for novels, comics, and music, continually re-examined. Each retelling grapples with contemporary fears. Is artificial intelligence our modern golem? Are we, like Rabbi Lowe, playing with forces we may not fully control? The enduring power of the golem legend lies in this perfect balance between a specific cultural heritage and a universal, timeless warning, a story preserved not in clay, but in the collective memory of a people, reminding all of humanity that the greatest power is not in creation, but in knowing when to stop. Now we leave the cobbled streets of Prague behind and set our course for the vast, open ocean, where the horizon is endless and the only map is the sky itself. For thousands of years, the Polynesian people undertook the most daring migrations in human history, sailing across 10 million square miles of the Pacific Ocean in double-hulled canoes, discovering and settling remote islands from Hawaii to New Zealand to Rapa Nui. They accomplished this without compasses, without sextants, and without any written charts. Their entire system of navigation was a living library, meticulously preserved in memory and passed down through generations of master navigators. This is the tradition of wayfinding, a sacred science that reads the language of the natural world, a knowledge system so precise it was nearly lost forever, only to be spectacularly rediscovered. The heart of this tradition lies in the concept of the star compass, a mental construct that divides the horizon into 32 houses. Each house is not defined by a single star, but by the point where a specific star rises and sets. A master navigator, or Polu, memorizes the entire celestial dome. He knows that when the star known as Hoculaire or Arcturus rises directly in the east, he is on the latitude of Hawaii. He knows that Sirius rising signifies a course to Tahiti, but stars are only one part of the equation. During the day or on overcast nights, the navigator relies on a symphony of other cues. He reads the ocean swells, the long, deep waves generated by distant weather systems. These swells form reliable highways across the sea. By feeling the rhythm of the canoe as it rolls over these swells beneath his feet, he can maintain his bearing even when he cannot see the sky. A shift in the pattern indicates a change in weather or the distant presence of an island. The signs of land are perhaps the most subtle and sophisticated elements of this knowledge. A cloud that seems stationary on the horizon might be hanging over an island, its shape often mimicking the island's profile. The specific flight patterns of birds are crucial. A tern flying out to sea in the morning will return to land at night, so following its path home can lead to safety. Even the color of the water changes, reflecting the light of a white sand lagoon or the dark green of a deep reef. A navigator might dip his hand into the sea and taste it, sensing the faint sweetness of freshwater runoff from a distant volcano. This is a holistic science requiring the navigator to engage all of his senses simultaneously, to become one with the canoe and the ocean, constantly updating his mental position based on a flowing tapestry of environmental data. This immense body of knowledge was not written down. It was preserved through a rigorous, sacred system of apprenticeship within specific navigator families, particularly in the coral atolls of the Caroline Islands like Satawal. A young boy would be chosen by a master navigator, often his father or uncle, and his training would last for decades. It began not at sea but on land, seated in a canoe house. Using stones and shells, the master would construct a star compass on the sandy floor. The apprentice would spend years memorizing the rising and setting points of hundreds of stars, the angle of swells, and the behavior of birds. He learned through chants and songs that encoded navigational routes, each rhythm and syllable holding critical information about currents, stars, and islands. This oral transmission was exacting. A mistake in a single word could mean sailing off into oblivion. The apprentice was also taught kapu, or taboos, such as the need for purity and focus before a voyage, because the safety of the entire crew depended on the navigator's clear mind and spiritual readiness. The tradition faced near extinction in the 20th century. Colonialism, the rise of modern shipping, and the devastation of World War II severely disrupted the teaching lineages. By the 1970s, it was feared that the last true master navigator had died. But then a remarkable renaissance began. A Hawaiian artist and historian named Kane had a vision to build a replica of a traditional Polynesian voyaging canoe which he named Hokulea, Star of Joy. The goal was to prove that these long voyages were intentional acts of exploration, not mere accidents of drift. The problem was no one in Hawaii remembered how to navigate without instruments. The voyage organizers had to seek out one of the last living master navigators, a man from Satawal named Pius Mau Piailug. Mau had been trained in the old way since childhood and held the precious knowledge. In 1976, Mau guided the Hokulea on its historic voyage from Hawaii to Tahiti, a journey of 2,500 miles, without a compass, watch, or chart, using only the stars, waves, and wildlife. He found the tiny island exactly on target after 34 days at sea. This achievement was a seismic event for Polynesia. It shattered colonial myths about their past and ignited a powerful cultural revival. Mau Piailug, seeing that his own people were losing the tradition, made a pivotal decision. He broke with the ancient custom of only teaching men from his own island and began to teach a new generation of Hawaiians and other Polynesians. His most famous student, Nainoa Thompson, mastered the star compass and has since trained countless others. Today, the legacy continues as the Hokulea and other canoes embark on worldwide voyages, their crews reading the same stars and waves as their ancestors, a living tradition that once again connects the islands of the Pacific, not with satellite signals, but with memory, courage, and the timeless patterns of the natural world. Within the heart of every ancient Roman home, there was a sacred, bustling intersection of daily life and the divine, centered around a small, painted shrine known as the Lararium. This was not a place for distant, imposing state gods, but for the intimate, watchful spirits of the household itself, the lairs. These were the guardian deities of the family, the land, and the storeroom, believed to be the deified ancestors of the family who watched over their living descendants. The rituals performed here were the bedrock of Roman religious life, a deeply personal tradition of honoring these protective spirits to ensure the health, prosperity, and continuity of the family line. It was a covenant of mutual care. The family provided offerings, and the lairs provided protection, a contract renewed with the smoke of daily incense and the pouring of daily wine. The practice was beautifully simple yet rich with symbolism. The paterfamilias, the male head of the household, acted as the primary priest for his domestic cult. Each day at the main meal, a small portion of food would be offered at the Lararium, often accompanied by a few drops of wine. On special occasions like birthdays, weddings, or the arrival of a new child, more elaborate offerings of honeyed cakes or a sacrificial animal might be made. The Lararium itself was a focal point, often adorned with small bronze statuettes of the lairs, depicted as youthful, dancing figures holding a drinking horn and a bowl. Alongside them were often figures of the genius, the divine spirit of the paterfamilias himself, and the penates, the gods of the pantry who guarded the family's food stores. This wasn't a weekly obligation but a seamless part of the household's rhythm, a moment of gratitude and connection before sharing a meal, intertwining the spiritual with the utterly mundane. This tradition faced its greatest challenge with the rise and eventual imperial adoption of Christianity. The new faith, with its focus on a single, universal God and its suspicion of pagan idols, sought to dismantle these ancient domestic practices. Yet the human need for intimate, familial spiritual intercession, for a tangible connection to protection within the home, could not be so easily erased. What transpired was not a clean break, but a profound and gradual transformation. The Church, in its wisdom, began to redirect this deeply ingrained devotional impulse toward a new set of figures, the saints. A saint, much like a law, was a human who had achieved a divine state and could act as an intercessor, a protector for specific people, places, and problems. Saint Anthony could help you find lost objects just as a law might. Saint Joseph watched over the home and family, echoing the domestic role of the lairs. The church provided a new framework, but the underlying psychological and spiritual need remained beautifully consistent. The physical space of the lararium evolved directly into the Christian home altar. The small shrine with its statuettes was replaced by a shelf or a corner table holding sacred images, a crucifix, a painting of the Virgin Mary, or a statue of a patron saint. The daily offerings of food and wine were sanctified into the lighting of a devotional candle or the placing of fresh flowers before an icon. The prayers, once specific chants to the lares, became recited rosaries or personal supplications to a saint. Most importantly, the knowledge and the sacred objects themselves became cherished heirlooms passed down through generations. A grandmother's well-worn rosary beads, a hand-painted icon of the family's patron saint brought over from the old country, the specific prayer to Saint Jude recited in times of desperate need, these were the new vessels of tradition. They were inherited not as mere antiques but as active, empowering links to the past and to the divine, ensuring that the guardian spirit of the household, though renamed and recontextualized, never truly left its post. This seamless continuity from the lararium to the home altar demonstrates how the deepest human traditions possess a remarkable ability to adapt their form while preserving their essential function, to make a house a home and a home a sanctuary. Deep within the ancient forests and mist-shrouded mountains of the Cherokee homeland, there exists a belief in a world within our world, inhabited by the Yunwi-Tsunsde, the little people. These are not the fairies of European lore, but something uniquely rooted in the Cherokee understanding of balance, nature, and respect. The Yunwi-Tsunsde are powerful, supernatural beings, often invisible to adults but sometimes glimpsed by children or those with a pure heart. They are guardians of the natural order, and the intricate tradition of stories and warnings surrounding them has been a cornerstone of Cherokee cultural preservation for centuries, teaching profound lessons about how to walk gently upon the earth. The little people are not a single entity but a diverse society with different tribes, each with its own character and role. Some are benevolent helpers like the rock cave little people, who are known to be kind to lost children, leading them safely back to their families or even teaching them the secrets of herbal medicine. Others, like the laurel people, are more mischievous and unpredictable, prone to playing tricks on hunters who become too arrogant or fishermen who take more than they need. Then there are the more dangerous ones who protect sacred places with fierce determination, disorienting those who intrude with bad intentions, making them lost for days in a space they thought they knew. This complex taxonomy itself is a sophisticated cultural map, classifying the various spirits of the landscape and dictating the proper way to interact with each specific environment. The primary vehicle for preserving this knowledge has always been the oral story, or a devgi, told by elders, often grandmothers and grandfathers, to the younger generations. These were not told as simple fantasy but as vital instruction. A story about a hunter who followed a strange, beautiful sound and was led in circles by the little people served as a serious warning against wandering into unfamiliar parts of the woods alone. A tale about a child who shared their food with a small, unseen visitor and was later rewarded with a bountiful harvest taught the values of generosity and community. The stories were always localized, set in specific rivers, caves, or rock formations known to the community, making the lessons immediate and tangible. The telling was a ritual in itself, often occurring at night, the cadence of the elder's voice and the crackle of the fire weaving the supernatural world into the fabric of the listener's reality, ensuring they understood that the Yunwi-Tsunsde were not far away but always present, always watching. This belief system was seamlessly integrated into daily life through practical, family-enforced rules of behavior. Parents taught their children specific protocols for navigating the woods. If you heard a high-pitched, ethereal laughter or the sound of a drumbeat from a place where no one should be, you did not investigate, you quietly turned and went the other way. It was considered deeply disrespectful to point directly at certain rock formations or ancient trees believed to be homes of the little people. Instead, one would gesture with a nod of the head or a pursing of the lips. Perhaps the most common teaching was that if you encountered something out of the ordinary, a perfectly arranged circle of stones, a strangely bent sapling, you should never disturb it. You might leave a small gift, like a bead or a piece of fruit, as a sign of respect before moving on. These practices functioned as a brilliant, culturally encoded safety guide, preventing children from wandering too far, teaching them to be observant, and instilling a deep-seated conservation ethic that protected delicate ecosystems long before the concept of environmentalism existed. The tradition also provided a framework for explaining the unexplainable in a pre-scientific world. A sudden illness might be attributed to offending the little people, necessitating a visit from a medicine person who knew the proper rituals and chants to appease them. A tool that went missing was often said to have been borrowed by the Yunwi Tsunsti and would be returned if the owner remained patient and respectful. These explanations were not meant to scare, but to provide a coherent world view where everything had a reason and a place, and where human actions had direct consequences in the spiritual realm. This reinforced social harmony and personal accountability, as every individual's behavior was seen as potentially impacting the entire community's relationship with the unseen world. Despite the immense pressures of colonization, forced removal on the Trail of Tears, and concerted efforts to erase native cultures, the stories of the Yunwi Tsunsti have endured with remarkable tenacity. This survival is a testament to the unwavering dedication of Cherokee elders who continued to whisper the stories to their grandchildren in boarding schools where they were punished for speaking their own language, and around kitchen tables in new lands far from their ancestral homes. The tradition proved adaptable, the lessons of respect for nature translated seamlessly into modern contexts of environmental protection. Today, these stories are experiencing a powerful resurgence, actively told in Cherokee language immersion schools, shared at cultural heritage centers, and discussed by community members who see in them not a relic of the past, but a living, breathing guide for the future. The Yunwi Tsunsti continue to teach, reminding everyone that the world is still full of wonder, that we are part of a delicate balance, and that some of the most important truths are carried not in books, but in the stories we tell around the fire. High in the stark, breathtaking expanse of the Altai Mountains, where the sky is a vast, endless blue, and the wind carries the whisper of ancient spirits, a unique partnership between human and bird has thrived for over 1,000 years. Here, among the Kazakh communities of Western Mongolia, the ancient tradition of eagle hunting, or buokichi, represents a profound fusion of survival skill, deep spiritual belief, and cultural identity. This is not a practice of domination, but one of mutual respect between the hunter and his golden eagle, a bond so sacred it is woven into the very fabric of family lineage and mythology, preserved with astonishing care against the tides of modernity. The journey of an eagle hunter begins not with the capture of a bird, but with a spiritual quest for permission. Before a hunter ventures into the mountains, he and his family will engage in prayers and offerings, seeking the blessing of the mountain spirits known as Ila. They believe that these spirits govern the well-being of all creatures, and a successful hunt is impossible without their consent. The hunter himself must be in a state of purity and focus. Any negativity or conflict in his heart is believed to be sensed by the eagle and the spirits, dooming the endeavor. This spiritual preparation underscores a fundamental tenet of the tradition. The eagle is not a pet or a simple tool, but a partner whose cooperation must be earned on both a physical and a metaphysical level. The hunt for a new eaglet is itself a carefully orchestrated ritual. Hunters seek out young female eaglets as they grow larger and are considered more powerful hunters than males. They do not take every eaglet from a nest, ensuring the survival of the species, and they often leave a gift, such as a piece of meat or a traditional offering, at the nesting site as a sign of respect and gratitude to the parent birds and the mountain spirits. The training of the eagle is a masterclass in patience and nonverbal communication, a language of trust built over countless hours. The young eaglet is brought into the hunter's home, often placed in the central, honored space of the family's ger or yurt. For the first several weeks, the hunter will spend almost every waking moment with the bird, feeding it by hand, speaking to it in low, soothing tones, and keeping it perched on his arm until the eagle becomes accustomed to human presence. The hunter will deprive himself of sleep, staying awake with the eagle to reinforce their bond and assert his role as its provider. The training involves a series of gradual steps, from calling the eagle to the glove over a short distance to eventually pursuing fox and hare pelts dragged behind a horse. The eagle is never punished. Its cooperation is won through reward and a deep, cultivated trust. An elder hunter teaches his son or grandson that you cannot command the eagle. You must invite it to hunt with you, a subtle but critical distinction that defines the entire relationship. This knowledge is the exclusive inheritance of specific families, passed with meticulous care from father to son across generations. A young boy will grow up watching his grandfather and father work with their eagles, absorbing the nuances of their movements, the specific whistles they use, and the way they read the eagle's body language. The most critical lessons are often shared not through lectures, but through stories told around the evening fire. Elders recount tales of famous eagles of the past, their legendary hunts, and the mystical encounters hunters have had with bird spirits. These narratives are not mere entertainment. They are the vehicle for transmitting the ethical codes, the spiritual beliefs, and the nuanced techniques that cannot be written in any manual. They teach that an eagle that has served a family well for a decade must be released back into the wild at the peak of its health, a final act of respect that ensures it can return to the mountains and breed, completing the sacred circle of life. The entire tradition culminates in the annual Golden Eagle Festival, a vibrant gathering that is far more than a competition. It is a living museum of cultural preservation, a chance for the wider community to celebrate and reinforce these ancient practices. Hunters adorned in traditional fox fur hats and elaborate hand-stitched coats parade with their eagles on their arms, the birds' hoods decorated with intricate silverwork. The festival events test the very skills that have been passed down for centuries. The eagle's accuracy in striking a fox pelt from horseback, its obedience in returning to the hunter's call from a great distance. But beneath the spectacle lies a deeper purpose. It is a forum where elders judge the quality of a young hunter's technique, where families arrange future marriages to strengthen eagle hunting lineages, and where the stories, songs, and spiritual beliefs that underpin the practice are shared and strengthened. In a world that is changing rapidly, this festival and the daily rituals in the mountain gers ensure that the silent, powerful language between a man and an eagle continues to be spoken, a defiant and beautiful echo of an ancient way of life. For a people whose history is written in both stone and sorrow, the story of a mountain is the story of themselves. For Armenians scattered across the globe, the majestic, snow-capped peak of Mount Ararat is far more than a geographical feature. It is the sacred, beating heart of a nation, a symbol of loss, resilience, and an unbreakable promise. Though the mountain itself lies just across the modern border in Turkey, visible yet untouchable, its image has been meticulously safeguarded within the Armenian soul, preserved through a powerful tradition of art, literature, and family storytelling that has defied genocide, diaspora, and the relentless passage of time. This is not merely a folklore, it is a spiritual act of preservation, a way of carrying the homeland in the heart when it can no longer be held in the hand. The mountain's deepest roots are buried in the bedrock of faith itself. According to the biblical narrative embraced by Armenian tradition, it was upon the slopes of Ararat that Noah's Ark came to rest after the Great Flood, making it the birthplace of a new humanity. This origin story is profoundly woven into the identity of the Armenian Apostolic Church, one of the world's oldest Christian communities. Within the family, this is not a distant myth but a point of personal connection. Parents and grandparents tell their children that their ancestors were the first to step onto that renewed earth, to receive God's covenant symbolized by the rainbow arching over the mountain's peak. This transforms Ararat from a passive landmark into an active participant in their spiritual history, a silent witness to divine promise and human renewal. It establishes the Armenian people as intrinsically tied to this sacred ground. Their presence there not a matter of political chance but of theological destiny, a story whispered from one generation to the next to affirm their ancient and rightful place in that landscape. This deep spiritual connection made the loss of the mountain following the Armenian genocide of 1915 not just a territorial amputation but a profound cultural and psychological wound. As survivors were scattered across the Middle East, Europe, and the Americas, the physical Ararat became a haunting silhouette on a receding horizon. It was in this crucible of loss that the tradition of preservation became a deliberate act of defiance. Families now living in Los Angeles, Beirut, or Buenos Aires would hang paintings and tapestries of the twin peaks of Ararat, Masses, and Sis in their living rooms, always positioned as the central focal point. The mountain became the first thing you saw when you entered an Armenian home, and the last thing you saw before you left. It was a daily visual reminder of what was lost and what must be remembered. The knowledge of what that mountain represented, the stories of the villages that once nestled in its shadow, the songs sung in its valleys, was kept alive not in school textbooks but in the oral histories shared around the dinner table, a sacred duty of memory passed from the generation that remembered the smell of its air to those who could only dream of it. This act of remembrance was powerfully amplified by Armenia's incredible artistic legacy. The mountain has been the single most enduring muse in Armenian art for centuries, depicted in countless illuminated manuscripts, oil paintings, and most famously in the work of the artist who embodies the diaspora's longing, Arshile Gorky. Gorky, a genocide survivor, painted the mountain again and again in his abstract, surrealist style. His paintings are not literal representations but emotional landscapes, pulsing with a visceral, painful yearning for the homeland he was forced to flee as a child. Families would discuss these works, using them as a gateway to talk about their own history and loss. Similarly, the mountain is a central character in Armenian literature, from the medieval epic poems of David of Sassoon to the modern prose of William Saroyan. Saroyan's famous declaration, "I should like to see any power of the world destroy this race, this small tribe of unimportant people, see if they will not live again," captures the defiant spirit that the image of Ararat fuels. These artistic and literary works became heirlooms of the collective consciousness, tools parents used to teach their children about endurance and identity. The tradition finds its most potent modern expression in a simple, powerful gesture, the pointing towards Ararat. In the Armenian capital of Yerevan, the city's main avenues are oriented to frame the perfect view of the mountain, a constant, breathtaking presence. Parents lift their children onto their shoulders and point to it, telling them the stories of Noah, of their ancestors, and of the land that lies just beyond reach. For those in the diaspora, the gesture is recreated with a painting on the wall or a photograph in a family album. This act of pointing is more than indication, it is a ritual of transmission. It is the physical passing of the torch of memory, a silent promise that the child now knows what is sacred and what must be carried forward. It ensures that even for those born thousands of miles away, Mount Ararat is not a foreign peak but the central coordinates of their inherited identity, a compass point that always guides them home in spirit, proving that a mountain held in the heart can be far more enduring than one held by borders. In a land forged by fire and ice, where steaming lava fields meet mighty glaciers, the Icelandic people have nurtured a relationship with the unseen world that remains vibrantly alive in the modern age. This is the enduring belief in the Huldufólk, or hidden people, a tradition that seamlessly blends ancient folklore with contemporary life in a way that is almost unique on Earth. For Icelanders, these elves are not the tiny, whimsical creatures of some fantasy tales, but rather a parallel society of beings who live in the rocks, hills, and cliffs, living lives much like our own, just beyond the veil of ordinary perception. This is not a relic of a superstitious past, but a living, breathing part of the national character, a cultural inheritance preserved through a remarkable combination of oral storytelling, environmental respect, and pragmatic adaptation. The most tangible and public manifestation of this belief can be seen in the nation's approach to construction and road planning. There are numerous, well-documented instances where major infrastructure projects have been altered, delayed, or even abandoned out of respect for the Huldufólk. It is a standard part of the development process to consult with not only engineers and environmentalists, but also with individuals known as alfasíknar, or elf mediums, who can communicate with the hidden people and ascertain whether a planned road or building might disturb their homes. One of the most famous examples occurred in the 1970s during a road project near the town of Elfhall, or Elf Hill. Workers repeatedly encountered equipment failures and mechanical breakdowns whenever they tried to move a particular large rock. After these unexplained setbacks, the project was halted, and the road was rerouted to curve gracefully around the boulder, which stands in the middle of the highway to this day as a testament to this deeply held respect. This isn't considered an irrational act, but a practical one, a way of avoiding bad luck and ensuring the long-term success and safety of a project by acknowledging the spiritual ecology of the land. This reverence for the landscape is nurtured from the earliest age within the Icelandic family. The tradition is kept alive not through formal doctrine, but through the intimate act of storytelling. Grandparents do not present the Huldufólk as a matter of belief to be debated, but as a matter of cultural fact to be understood. A child might be told a story about their own great-grandmother who, on a cold winter's night, heard beautiful music coming from a nearby cliff and left a bowl of skyr out as an offering, only to find it empty in the morning. Another tale might warn of a farmer who carelessly piled stones from a known elf dwelling into a new wall, only to have his livestock fall mysteriously ill until the stones were respectfully returned. These narratives are always grounded in specific local geography, transforming the entire Icelandic countryside into a storybook where every rock formation and grassy knoll might hold a secret history. This oral transmission ensures that the knowledge is not abstract, but a practical guide for how to interact with the environment, teaching a form of deep-seated conservation ethics wrapped in a magical narrative. The resilience of this tradition in a highly educated, technologically advanced society speaks to its profound cultural function. For Icelanders, the stories of the Huldufólk are more than just folklore. They are a foundational part of their identity and a way of understanding their dramatic, often volatile homeland. The island itself is geologically young and incredibly active, with earthquakes reshaping the land and volcanoes periodically rewriting the map. This belief system provides a framework for living respectfully with powerful, unpredictable natural forces. It encourages a humility that recognizes humanity is not the sole occupant of the world, but one citizen among many, seen and unseen. This worldview fosters a powerful connection to nature, ensuring that even amidst progress, the land is treated not as a resource to be conquered, but as a neighbor to be respected. The hidden people are the soul of the landscape, and by listening for them, Icelanders continue to listen to the land itself, preserving a whisper of the ancient world in the heart of the modern one. Our final journey takes us into the heart of the Mexican home, where the boundary between medicine and magic softly blurs in the hands of a trusted healer. Across Mexico and in communities throughout the diaspora, the tradition of the curandero or curandera represents a breathtakingly resilient synthesis of ancient indigenous knowledge and centuries-old Spanish folk magic, a holistic system of healing preserved not in universities but within the intimate embrace of family lineages. This is a living tradition where grandmothers are often the first doctors, where the garden is a natural pharmacy, and where an illness might be treated with both an herbal tea and a spiritual cleansing, acknowledging that true wellness must address both the body and the soul. The path to becoming a curandero is almost never a choice of career, but a calling, a dawn or spiritual gift believed to be bestowed by God. This gift often reveals itself within a family, passed down through generations. A grandmother might notice her granddaughter has a natural intuition for people's ailments, or a child might demonstrate an uncanny ability to calm others. The training is a lifelong apprenticeship, typically under a respected elder, an abuela, a tia, or a community healer. The apprentice, or ayudante, learns not from textbooks but by doing, by carefully harvesting plants at the correct lunar phase, by observing the precise hand movements used in a massage, and by memorizing the endless prayers and invocations whispered over a patient. This knowledge is considered a sacred trust, and it is passed down with the solemn understanding that it must only be used for healing, never for harm. The very method of transmission, oral, experiential, and deeply personal, ensures that the tradition remains fluid, adaptable, and intimately connected to the specific community it serves. Perhaps the most profound aspect of this preserved knowledge is the mastery of plantas medicinales, the medicinal plants. A skilled curandera possesses an encyclopedic understanding of local flora, a direct inheritance from pre-Hispanic indigenous practices. She knows that ruda rue is not just a plant but a powerful protector against the mal de ojo, or evil eye, often kept in pots by the front door. She understands that manzanilla chamomile soothes a nervous stomach, while episode can expel intestinal parasites. Romero rosemary might be used in a tea for circulation, but it is also an essential ingredient in spiritual cleansings for its purifying properties. This knowledge is a living library, each plant holding a double meaning, a physiological effect and a spiritual symbolism. The curandera teaches her apprentice how to speak to the plants, to ask their permission before harvesting, and to thank them for their sacrifice, maintaining a relationship with the natural world that is both practical and deeply reverent. This holistic approach is perfectly exemplified in the practice of limpias, or spiritual cleansings. A limpia is performed to rid a person of negative energy, spiritual blockages, or susto, soul loss due to a fright. The curandera might use a bundle of fresh herbs like basil, rosemary, or albahaca, whisking it over the person's body while praying passionately. Another common method uses a whole, raw egg passed over the body to absorb the negative energy. The egg is then cracked into a glass of water, and its form is read to diagnose the nature of the problem, much like reading an X-ray of the spirit. The prayers spoken during these rituals are themselves a fascinating artifact of cultural fusion, blending Catholic invocations to saints like San Antonio or the Virgin of Guadalupe with much older, instinctual pleas to the spirit world. The limpia does not replace a visit to a medical doctor. It complements it, addressing the spiritual malaise that a pill cannot touch. For a tradition so deeply personal, its survival through the pressures of colonialism, modernization, and the dominance of Western medicine is a powerful story of quiet resistance. The knowledge of the curandero was kept alive in the home, in the kitchen, and in the garden. When institutional medicine was inaccessible or untrusted, the community turned inward to its own healers. Today, this tradition is experiencing a remarkable renaissance, not as a rejection of modern science, but as a complement to it. People speak of curanderismo as a form of cultural psychotherapy, a way to treat the anxiety and disconnection of modern life with the grounding practices of the ancestors. Young Mexican Americans are now seeking out their grandparents, eager to learn the recipes and rituals that their parents' generation might have dismissed as superstition, recognizing within them a profound wisdom about the interconnectedness of life. The enduring power of the curandero lies in this beautiful balance, a practice that heals the stomach ache with a tea, the heartache with a prayer, and the soul with the unwavering belief that to be well, one must be whole. And so our journey ends not with a conclusion, but with an invitation to see the world with new eyes. We've ventured from the windswept shores of Scandinavia to the sun-baked banks of the Nile, from the sacred silence of the Finnish sauna to the vibrant altars of Mexico. We've encountered protective spirits, prophetic priestesses, and silent guardians of clay. These 30 traditions are far more than just stories. They are a breathtaking testament to humanity's profound collective ingenuity. They represent a deep and abiding urge to make sense of our world, to connect with forces greater than ourselves, and to ensure that the most precious pieces of our identity are never, ever lost to time. What unites the meticulous star charts of the Polynesian navigator, the rhythmic chants of the Vedic priest, and the whispered warnings of the Scottish grandmother is a shared understanding that some knowledge is too vital to be entrusted solely to parchment or stone. These myths and rituals became the ultimate survival tools, encoded into the very rhythm of daily life. They were woven into the songs sung while working, the rules of behavior taught to children, the recipes prepared for holidays, and the stories told by firelight. This was a living, breathing library, its shelves stocked not with books but with lived experience, its pages turned not by hand but by the passing of the seasons and the turning of generations. They survived conquest, adaptation, and even persecution because they answered a fundamental human need for belonging, for meaning, and for a bridge between the world we see and the one we feel. These ancient narratives continue to resonate with us today because they speak to the very core of the human experience. The tale of the golem asks us to consider the ethical limits of our own creations, a question that echoes in every discussion about artificial intelligence. The Vision Quest speaks to our modern search for purpose and authenticity in an increasingly noisy world. The protective rituals, from the haft-seen table to the domovoy's offerings, fulfill our innate desire to create safety and order amidst life's chaos. They remind us that we are part of a much larger story, one that began long before us and will continue long after. In a world that often feels fragmented and fast-paced, these traditions offer a powerful sense of continuity, a thread that connects us to our ancestors and to each other. This is not a history that belongs locked in a museum. It is a living, evolving conversation, and it continues with you. The most beautiful part of this human tapestry is that every single family adds their own unique thread. Perhaps your grandparents had a special story about a lucky charm, a saying repeated during a storm, a particular way to celebrate a holiday that always included a quirky, unexplained ritual. These are not trivialities, they are the echoes of your own personal mythology, the whispers of your lineage. We would be utterly honored if you would share a piece of that legacy with us in the comments below. Tell us about the mythical tradition in your family, the story, the character, the superstition, or the practice that has been passed down. Let's build a modern archive of human wonder together, right here, and celebrate the incredible, unbroken chain of storytellers, guardians, and dreamers to which